A billionaire invites his ex-girlfriend to his wedding, but she arrives with a boy who looks exactly like him. What she reveals in front of everyone changes everything. Hello, viewer. Thanks for joining us. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments, along with the city you're watching from. Now let's continue with the story. A pale autumn sun lit up the old Victorian row house where Hayley Green lived with her 6-year-old son, James. The leaves on the maple trees in her small front yard were beginning to turn a rusty orange, a quiet reminder that a new season was upon them. Hayley had just returned from her shift at a local nursing home in Hartford, Connecticut, when she noticed a glossy envelope tucked into the mail slot. It stood out among the usual coupons and utility bills, elegant, ivory-colored, with a lavish gold border. She set down her worn leather purse and carefully opened the envelope. The bold text, embossed in shimmering gold letters, bore a name that made her hand tremble: Dylan Stone. The invitation announced his upcoming wedding on Martha's Vineyard, scheduled for just a week away. Dylan Stone. The man who had once occupied her every dream and who'd vanished from her life so abruptly 7 years prior. She couldn't tear her gaze away from the words. As if sensing something momentous, James skipped into the hallway. His wide, grayish-blue eyes shone with curiosity. "Mom, is that for me?" he asked, glancing at the envelope. His fair hair and the shape of his chin were uncanny reflections of the very man named in that invitation, though James had never met his father. Hayley placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "Not exactly, sweetheart," she said softly, struggling to quell the knot forming in her throat. Every time she looked at her son's face, she saw Dylan's imprint, the same mesmerizing eyes, the same tilt of the mouth when curious or excited. There had been a time when she and Dylan were nearly inseparable, talking about building a future far from the complexities of corporate life. But then, in what felt like an instant, he'd chosen success over love, leaving her to navigate heartbreak alone. After tucking James into bed that evening, Hayley wandered into the tiny living room and sank onto the love seat, the invitation still clutched in her hand. Her life for the past 6 years had been a quiet cycle of caring for her son, working and trying, unsuccessfully, to forget the man who had shattered her world. The night was silent, yet her mind whirled with questions. Why would Dylan send me an invitation to his wedding? Was it a thoughtless courtesy, some misguided attempt at politeness, or was it something else, one final jab at her heart? Memories flooded back. The taste of sea air during their road trips to Cape Cod, the giddy sensation she'd felt when Dylan first whispered he loved her, the ache of betrayal when he abandoned her for his ambitious entrepreneurial goals. Hayley wiped away an angry tear, recalling how she'd tried to reach him shortly after he left. Each phone call, each message had gone unanswered. Only after many futile attempts did she realize she was pregnant with James. By then, Dylan was gone, unreachable, distant, already on a path to becoming the tech mogul people in Hartford whispered about with awe. She considered throwing the invitation away, but a wave of guilt and yearning crushed that impulse. James deserved the truth. Had she deprived her son of a father by not pushing harder to contact Dylan? Was it selfish or protective to keep James's parentage a secret all these years? The next morning, as sunlight filtered through the lace curtains, Hayley decided to call her older brother Ethan Green, who lived in Boston. Their relationship had become somewhat strained, especially when he found out about James's father. Still, she trusted Ethan's blunt honesty. "Hayley," came his gruff voice over the phone, "I can't believe Dylan's inviting you to his wedding. That man has some nerve." She sighed. "Ethan, I don't know what to do. The ceremony is next week, and it's in Martha's Vineyard. It's close enough that I could feasibly go, but should I?" He hesitated. "If he's done nothing for you or James in 7 years, What makes you think he deserves any part of your life now? That includes your time or your presence." Haley paused, her gaze drifting to the doorway where James was quietly playing with his Legos. "It might be bigger than just me," she whispered. "James has been asking about his dad more often. He sees fathers picking up kids at school, and he wonders, maybe Dylan has a right to know, if he doesn't already suspect." Ethan sighed. "I get it. But I don't want to see you hurt again." Tears threatened to escape as Haley thanked her brother and hung up. The invitation trembled in her grip. She glanced at James, so full of innocence and laughter, completely unaware of the forces that once tore his parents apart. A decision formed in her mind, albeit shakily. She could either run from the pain or risk confronting Dylan in front of the entire elite circle he now called his own. For the first time in 7 years, Haley allowed herself to picture facing Dylan's stone again. She imagined him standing in front of an altar, oblivious to the secret he had helped create. Whether it was closure, confrontation, or redemption, something told her she couldn't let this invitation go unanswered. That Monday morning, Haley arrived early at the New Horizons nursing home, where she worked as a nurse, determined to push aside her swirling emotions. The halls were bathed in the soft hum of fluorescent lights, and the faint scent of antiseptic hovered in the air. She greeted her patients with a warm smile, gently adjusting pillows and checking medications. Yet, even as she tended to Mrs. Carlyle's blood pressure or calmed Mr. Jennings, who often fretted about missing his late wife, Haley's thoughts kept returning to the gilded wedding invitation now tucked into the bottom drawer of her kitchen desk. During her break, she found a quiet corner near the small courtyard. Perched on a bench that faced a tiny fountain, she fished out her phone. Marcus Thompson's number flashed on the screen. He had been an old friend of hers and Dylan's from years back, someone who had drifted away when Dylan rose to wealth, but occasionally kept in touch with Haley via holiday greetings. She answered hesitantly, "Hello." "Haley!" Marcus's voice held a mixture of enthusiasm and caution. "I, assume you got the invite." She exhaled. "Yes, I did. Very unexpected." "I figured." There was a pause. "Look, I'll be at the wedding. Dylan's changed a lot over the years. He's different. I can't claim to know him now, but I thought it might be easier if you have at least one friendly face around." Haley glanced at the tiny fountain, watching the water dribble down a worn stone. "Marcus, I appreciate it. I'm just not sure if I'm going yet." His voice softened. "I understand, but Dylan's fiancée, Charlotte Myers, is from a high-profile family, media giant. This wedding isn't just a ceremony, it's an event. If you decide to come, you should be prepared for a crowd." She swallowed. It had been one thing to imagine confronting Dylan in a private setting, perhaps telling him in a trembling voice that he had a son, but a crowd of 400 wealthy onlookers. That possibility made her palms sweat. After she ended the call, she returned indoors to find the head nurse, Mrs. Elaine Porter, eyeing her with concern. "Everything all right, dear?" asked the silver-haired woman, placing a hand on Haley's shoulder. Haley forced a small smile. "I'm just dealing with a complicated decision." Mrs. Porter tilted her head sympathetically. "If you need time off, let me know. You've earned it. You work double shifts most weeks and rarely take vacations. We can manage without you for a bit, if necessary." Haley nodded, grateful. "Thank you. I'll let you know." That evening, after picking James up from school, she caught sight of the boy's curious expression as he gazed at classmates departing with fathers who welcomed them with playful banter or comforting arms. The moment they stepped into their home, James voiced a question that tugged at her heart. "Mom, why don't I have a dad who comes get me from school?" She knelt beside him, brushing back his soft blonde hair. "Sweetheart, your dad, he lives far away." It was a half-truth, but she couldn't find the courage to say more just yet. He's a busy man with a lot of responsibilities. But that doesn't mean he doesn't matter. His eyes, the same piercing hue as Dylan's, flickered with a mix of wonder and confusion. Do you think he'd like me? For a moment, the same wave of anguish she'd felt countless times surged through her chest. Of course he would, she whispered. You're a wonderful boy. After James slipped away to his room, Haley made a simple dinner of soup and grilled cheese. The tension thrumming through her body ruined her appetite. She recalled Marcus's warning about the wedding's magnitude, Ethan's caution against getting hurt again, and the growing sense that time was running out for James to know his father. Around 8 in the evening, the phone rang again. This time, the caller ID read unknown. With a shaking hand, she answered. Silence greeted her at first, then a soft click. Probably a wrong number or a glitch, she thought, but it left her feeling uneasy, almost as though Dylan or someone from his circle was testing her resolve. Unable to sleep, Haley settled on the couch with a blanket draped over her shoulders. She flicked on the TV, but the noise of the late-night broadcast blended into static in her mind. The invitation was now placed on the coffee table, the gold lettering gleaming under the lamp's glow. She felt as if it were beckoning her to make a choice that would either bring long-awaited answers or reopen every wound she had painstakingly tried to heal. When her eyes finally drifted shut, Haley dreamt of standing on a rocky beach. The tide roared in the distance, and Dylan's silhouette hovered on the horizon. She could see James running toward him, arms wide, but just as father and son were about to meet, the image blurred and vanished. Haley woke with a startled gasp. Even in her dreams, the possibility of father and son uniting felt precarious, overshadowed by an uncertain future. In the days that followed, Haley grew restless. She found herself pacing between her tiny kitchen and the living room, battling the invisible tug-of-war raging inside her. Morning shifts at the nursing home offered a reprieve, but only briefly. The moment her mind wandered, the thought of the upcoming wedding swooped back in like a persistent raven. On a grey Wednesday afternoon, she invited her older brother, Ethan Green, to Hartford. He arrived in his well-loved pickup truck, stepping onto her porch with a wary look on his face. Even before they hugged, she read the concern etched into his posture. Seated at the small wooden table in her kitchen, they sipped coffee in silence until Ethan broke it. "So, you haven't decided for sure if you're going?" he asked, glancing around the cozy space as though searching for evidence of a definite plan. Haley shook her head. "I'm torn, Ethan. Part of me wants to protect James from the chaos of Dylan's world. Another part of me wonders if I owe it to him, to both of them really, to reveal the truth." Ethan's gaze flickered to the living room, where James was absorbed in coloring a dinosaur picture. "I know you want what's best for your son, but that man—" He paused, letting the bitterness in his voice dissipate. "He left you with nothing but heartbreak, Haley." "I remember," she said quietly, biting her lip. "But it doesn't erase the fact that Dylan is James's father," Ethan sighed. "I'm just afraid he'll hurt you again." They were interrupted by James, who bounded into the kitchen waving his dinosaur drawing. "Uncle Ethan, look!" he exclaimed, holding up the colorful paper. Ethan ruffled the boy's hair, plastering on a warm smile that didn't quite reach his worried eyes. Once James retreated, Ethan leaned forward. "Listen, if you decide to go, you won't be alone. I can drive you there, or at least stay nearby in case you need me." A small swell of relief eased Haley's tension. "Thank you," she whispered, covering Ethan's hand with hers. "It helps to know you're in my corner." That evening, after Ethan left, Haley rummaged through the corners of her mind, recalling the day she discovered she was pregnant. She had been determined to tell Dylan, but found her emails bounce back, her calls and texts unreplied. She'd even tried contacting his new business associates, only to be stonewalled. Eventually, she took the hint. Dylan Stone had severed all ties. The sting of that rejection still pulsed in her chest whenever she imagined the conversation that never happened. Later that night, James fell asleep on the couch watching cartoons. Haley gently scooped him up and tucked him into his small bedroom. His peaceful expression reminded her of the fleeting tranquility of childhood, an innocence she desperately wanted to shield from the complexities of adult life. In her own room, she flipped through an old photo album. So many snapshots of her and Dylan in their early 20s, smiling at the camera in front of a campus library, arms linked at a summer carnival, gazing dreamily at each other under fireworks on the 4th of July. Those pictures felt like relics from another lifetime, one she could hardly believe had existed. She recalled Dylan's ambition, how it sometimes eclipsed everything else. He was the kind of man who could charm an entire room, yet remained laser-focused on forging a world-changing company. The magnetism that had drawn her to him eventually became his biggest flaw. He struggled to balance success with personal commitments. And in the end, she lost out to his unrelenting drive. Still, the invitation loomed. After all these years of silence, why had he extended it? Did he know about James? Or was it some cruel reminder of the life she could have had? An unspoken message that he had finally achieved everything without her? The sharp ring of the phone cut through the hush of her thoughts. Expecting possibly another friend or nurse from work, she picked it up. An unfamiliar voice greeted her, polite yet formal. "Miss Green, this is Amanda Carlyle, Charlotte Meyer's personal assistant. We are confirming guest attendance and special accommodations. Are you planning to attend the wedding on Saturday?" Haley's throat constricted. Saturday? That was mere days away. I haven't made a final decision, she managed. "Understood," Amanda said brightly. "We have you down on the list Dylan provided. If you do plan to come, we'll email you details regarding lodging and the rehearsal dinner." "We look forward to seeing you." The line clicked. Haley remained motionless, phone pressed against her ear. So Dylan himself had put her name on the guest list. Her heart pounded with questions. Was he oblivious to how painful this was? Or was he intentionally trying to provoke her? Either way, she felt the weight of that old wound grow heavier. Dylan Stone had officially pulled her into his orbit again. And James, innocently coloring dinosaurs in the next room, was about to be caught in the gravitational pull of a past that refused to stay buried. A chill wind swept through Hartford the next morning, scattering leaves across Haley's front steps. She wrapped her cardigan tighter around herself as she carried James's backpack out to the car. It was Thursday, just 2 days before the wedding, and she hadn't mustered the courage to confirm or decline the invitation. Yet the clock was ticking relentlessly. Pulling into the elementary school parking lot, she parked among the rows of cars. Other parents rushed their children along, juggling coffee cups and deadlines. James hopped out, turning back to Haley with an inquisitive smile. "Are we going somewhere special soon, Mom? You've been acting kinda worried." Haley kneeled, smoothing the collar of his jacket. "I'm thinking about attending a ceremony," she replied. "It's big and fancy, and I'm still deciding if it's the right thing to do. Will there be cake?" His eyes sparkled with childlike excitement. "I like chocolate cake." She laughed softly. "There might be. I'll let you know, okay?" She watched him join his classmates, her heart twisted in a swirl of apprehension and longing. For James, life was a kaleidoscope of bright possibilities. For her, the kaleidoscope's patterns had grown tangled by heartbreak and secrets. That afternoon, she finished her shift at the nursing home and found a handwritten note on her locker from Mrs. Eleanor Baker, a retired nurse who volunteered there a few hours each week. "I sense you're troubled," it read. "If you need someone to talk to, come find me in the courtyard." Mrs. Baker was in her late 70s, spry and observant, with kind hazel eyes that seemed to see into people's souls. Curious and touched by the gesture, Haley met Mrs. Baker outside, in a quiet corner of the building's small rose garden. A crisp breeze rustled the bushes as Haley explained, in halting phrases, the saga with Dylan Stone and the wedding invitation. Mrs. Baker listened intently, her gaze warm but solemn. When Haley finished, the older woman squeezed her hand. "I understand the fear of reopening old wounds," she said gently. "I once loved a man who left me for a grand adventure. He went overseas, wrote me for a while, then the letters stopped. By the time he returned, I'd moved on. Yet a piece of me always wondered, what if?" She paused, allowing the wind to carry a swirl of dried rose petals. "Sometimes, facing the past is the only way to set yourself free." Haley nodded, touched by Mrs. Baker's empathy. "I'm worried about James most of all. He's at an age where he notices everything, but understands only fragments." A hint of a smile curved on Mrs. Baker's lips. "Children sense truth. Even when we try to cloak it, all we can do is show them they are loved. If you believe telling Dylan is right, then do it, even if it shatters the perfect illusions people have." That evening, Haley returned home to find an official-looking envelope in her mailbox. Inside was a personal note from Charlotte Myers herself, typed but signed in swirling cursive. It read, "Dear Haley, we are delighted that you may attend our wedding. Martha's Vineyard is enchanting this time of year. Should you need assistance arranging transportation or lodging, do not hesitate to contact my staff. Warmly, Charlotte Myers." The formal politeness made Haley's skin prickle. Charlotte's sincerity was questionable at best. Haley pictured the sophisticated brunette socialite, heiress to a media empire, doing her duty to maintain appearances. A voice in Haley's mind whispered that Charlotte might be well aware of Haley's past with Dylan. The invitation had the taste of something orchestrated, perhaps meant to flaunt their lavish union or remind Haley of what she could never have. Unable to hold her emotions in any longer, Haley grabbed her phone and dialed Marcus. "What's going on?" she demanded the moment he answered. "Charlotte just sent me a note, sounding all polite and welcoming. Is she trying to rub it in my face?" A pause crackled over the line. "Charlotte's complicated," Marcus said with a wary sigh. "She's savvy. Everything about the wedding has been curated to perfection. My guess is she wants every piece of Dylan's past to be wrapped up neatly. No loose ends, including you." Haley's grip on the phone tightened. "I'm hardly a loose end," she whispered. "I'm the mother of Dylan's child." "And she might not know that," Marcus said softly. "Or if she does, she's choosing to act as though everything is under control. Either way, they're expecting you." Haley felt a bitter taste on her tongue. "Thank you, Marcus," she said, ending the call. The entire situation seemed like a precarious performance on a high wire. One misstep and everyone would come crashing down. Late that night, she packed a small suitcase. She set aside a neat outfit for James, along with a modest yet tasteful dress for herself, one she'd worn only once at a cousin's wedding. Her hand trembled as she placed the outfits into the case. A sense of finality washed over her. She was going to Martha's Vineyard, and she couldn't predict the storm that would follow. Saturday morning arrived with a brisk wind and a pale, cloudy sky. Haley woke before dawn, heart pounding. She carefully dressed James in a collared shirt and slacks, feeling a pang of both pride and anxiety at how grown-up he looked. He grinned at her in the mirror, unaware of the magnitude of the day ahead. By 6:30, her suitcase was loaded into Ethan's pickup. He insisted on driving them to the ferry in Woods Hole, Massachusetts, from where they'd travel to Martha's Vineyard. The ride felt interminable. The hum of the engine and the rhythmic motion along the highway did little to calm Haley's nerves. James, strapped into his booster seat, busied himself with a coloring book. "Are we going to an island, Mom?" he asked, wide-eyed. She forced a smile, glancing over her shoulder. "Yes, it's a place called Martha's Vineyard. You'll see the ocean, and we'll take a ferry boat." "It might be fun." Ethan kept his focus on the road, but Haley sensed his tension in the way his knuckles gripped the steering wheel. Finally, he broke the silence. "I can drop you off. Maybe find a motel in Falmouth. Call me if things get too intense." Grateful for his support, she reached for his hand on the console. "Thank you for being here. I know you think I'm walking into a fire." He flashed a sideways glance. "I just hope you're wearing flame-proof armor." They arrived at the ferry terminal in Woods Hole with enough time to check in and board. James's excitement grew as he spotted seagulls hovering over the docks, crying out in the salty breeze. Haley paid for the tickets, her heart hammering in her chest as she clutched them in her hand. This was it. Once she was on that boat, turning back would be much harder. Ethan helped carry the small suitcase onto the ferry. Tourists bustled around them, snapping pictures and admiring the water. James leaned against the rail, the wind ruffling his hair. "Mom, look! I can see the waves!" he exclaimed, pointing to the choppy waters. Haley stood beside her son, noticing how the morning light in his eyes echoed the same determined spark she remembered in Dylan. She placed a steadying hand on James's shoulder, praying the day wouldn't leave him scarred. When the ferry pulled into Vineyard Haven, the day had grown brighter, although clouds still rolled overhead. True to her word, Charlotte's assistant had arranged a transport van from the docks to the small hotel where Haley and James would stay. Ethan lingered at the ferry terminal, promising to be just a phone call away. With a final hug and a few whispered words of encouragement, he let Haley and James climb into the black van alone. The drive through Martha's Vineyard was both quaint and surreal. White-clappered houses, pristine beaches, and lush greenery created a postcard-perfect image, far removed from Haley's cozy but modest neighborhood in Hartford. She held James's hand, gazing out the window as they passed grand estates behind wrought-iron gates. One of those, no doubt, belonged to the Myers family. They arrived at the Seabreeze Inn, a comfortable, if unassuming, hotel nestled near the harbor. A friendly concierge in a crisp uniform welcomed Haley, guiding her to a tidy room on the second floor. James, full of curiosity, bounced on the bed and peeked out the window overlooking a small garden. After settling in, Haley surveyed herself in the bathroom mirror. Her dark hair was pinned back in a simple chignon, and she wore a powder blue dress that flattered her figure without drawing attention. She practiced a steadying breath. "This is happening," she told herself, her pulse drumming. "In a matter of hours, I'll see Dylan again." A knock at the door startled her. Opening it, she found Marcus standing in the hallway with a hesitant grin. He wore a tailored grey suit and held a small bouquet of wildflowers. "I thought you might need a friendly face," he said by way of greeting. She stepped aside to let him in, her eyes misting with gratitude. "Marcus, thank you for everything. I didn't expect you to go out of your way like this." He set the flowers on the dresser, leaning down to wave at James, who was peering at him curiously. "Hello, little man. You must be James." Then Marcus turned to Haley, lowering his voice. "The ceremony starts in 2 hours. Charlotte's father hired an event planner to coordinate everything to the minute. Are you ready for this?" Haley pressed her lips together. "I honestly don't know, but I'm here now, and I can't run forever." Marcus gave a sympathetic nod. "Then let's face this together. At least you won't be alone." She managed a small smile. Her heart still pounded with uncertainty, but for the first time in years, she felt a glimmer of courage. Even if everything was about to spiral out of control, Haley wouldn't betray her resolve or her son's right to know the truth about his father. Haley stood in the small, elegantly decorated lobby of the Seabreeze Inn, still trying to gather her thoughts. James clung to her side, enchanted by the gleaming marble floors and sparkling chandelier overhead. As she was about to head for the door that led to the courtyard, her phone buzzed in her bag. She glanced at the screen. Mrs. Eleanor Baker. An odd relief settled over her. Although Mrs. Baker was a volunteer at the nursing home in Hartford and not physically present on Martha's Vineyard, the older woman had become a dependable source of comfort. Haley stepped into a quiet alcove to answer. "Mrs. Baker," she said, careful to keep her voice low so she wouldn't distract the flow of hotel guests rushing in and out. "My dear," came the warm, slightly raspy voice. "I hope I'm not interrupting, but I wanted to check on you. You've been on my mind." Haley took a breath, feeling a sudden urge to confide everything. "I'm okay. Well, as okay as one can be when facing all of this." She exhaled, scanning the busy lobby. "I'm at the inn. The wedding is soon." "I see," Mrs. Baker replied. "Perhaps you'd like one small reminder of who you are and how far you've come." Haley heard rustling on the other end. Then Mrs. Baker's voice dropped to a soothing hush. "Remember that brooch I showed you at the nursing home? The cameo piece that belonged to my grandmother? It symbolizes courage through adversity. When I was your age, I found myself at a crossroads, not unlike the one you're facing. That brooch was my talisman, a physical reminder that there is strength within us we can't always see." Haley smiled, recalling the ornate cameo Mrs. Baker had displayed one afternoon. "I remember it well. You told me it carried your family's motto, truth above all." "Yes," Mrs. Baker said. "I know you can't hold it in your hand right now, but I want you to picture it pinned to your heart, guiding you. You're about to do something incredibly brave. Let this moment define you as a woman of truth." Emotion constricted Haley's throat. "Thank you. I just hope I'm doing the right thing." "You are," Mrs. Baker replied softly. "Whatever happens, you'll face it with integrity. That's all that matters." Haley ended the call, quietly tucking her phone away. She felt bolstered by Mrs. Baker's words, as though the cameo brooch were truly resting against her chest. Taking James by the hand, she ventured outside to meet Marcus, who had offered to guide her to a pre-wedding gathering. They emerged onto a stone patio overlooking a manicured garden. A few elegantly dressed guests meandered about, nibbling on canapes and sipping champagne. The hush of excitement in the air reminded Haley of a stage set moments before the curtains rose. Marcus appeared at her side, dressed smartly in his tailored suit. "Haley," he greeted, his tense smile betraying nerves of his own. "They're holding a small get-together for the out-of-town guests. Are you sure you're ready?" She squared her shoulders. "Ready as I'll ever be," she said, willing her voice to remain steady. James tugged at Haley's sleeve. "Mom, is there going to be cake?" he asked, wide-eyed, scanning the array of hors d'oeuvres. Marcus chuckled. "Not yet, buddy, but maybe soon." They walked through the garden, catching curious glances from other attendees. Some offered polite smiles. Others seemed to speculate about Haley and the child at her side. The guests were impeccably dressed in designer suits and cocktail dresses, making her feel self-conscious in her simple attire. She lifted her chin, reminding herself of Mrs. Baker's words and the invisible cameo brooch pinned at her heart. After weaving through the crowd, they stopped near a tall marble fountain. Marcus quietly pointed out prominent figures. Charlotte's father, William Myers, stood by a marble pillar with a small circle of well-heeled individuals, speaking in low, authoritative tones. A revered name in the media industry, he exuded an air of command that almost radiated. Charlotte was nowhere to be seen, which gave Haley a momentary sense of relief. Then, like a shift in the atmosphere, she spotted Dylan Stone stepping onto the patio. Clad in a tailored navy suit, his dark hair carefully styled, he exuded a polished charisma that made it impossible to ignore him. Hayley's heart lurched. She felt an odd mix of familiarity and disorientation, remembering the carefree Dylan who once spun her around on a beach, promising they'd conquer the world together. He hadn't yet noticed her. He was busy greeting a board member from his tech company. She could see the quick, businesslike handshake, the faint curve of a practiced smile, but even from a distance, she recognized the crease of tension near his brow. Marcus touched her elbow. "Let's hang back for a moment," he murmured. "No need to force the encounter right this second." Hayley nodded, swallowing the unease that rose in her throat. James tugged again at her sleeve. "Mom, who's that man?" he asked, gazing at Dylan. She paused, her pulse thrumming. "He's someone very important," she replied softly. "I'll explain soon." Raising her gaze from James to Dylan, she silently willed for strength. No matter how carefully she tried to orchestrate this, the reality was that her hidden truth was about to collide with Dylan Stone's meticulously arranged life. Mentally clutching Mrs. Baker's brooch, Hayley steadied herself. The threshold was right in front of her, and whether she stepped across calmly or was dragged over by circumstance, the moment of truth had undeniably arrived. Later that day, Hayley found herself at the threshold of the wedding venue, an opulent estate on the western side of Martha's Vineyard, where lush lawns sprawled toward a scenic ocean cliff. It was a place that looked plucked from a glossy magazine, complete with ivy climbing up stone walls and a row of vintage lanterns guiding guests toward the main entrance. Marcus walked slightly ahead, weaving through the throng of well-dressed attendees. James clutched Hayley's hand, his eyes absorbing every detail. He kept whispering observations like, "Mom, I saw a lady wearing diamonds bigger than my crayons," which made Hayley smile in spite of her nerves. Standing by the tall double doors, a uniformed attendant checked names against an iPad list. When Hayley approached, she noticed the flicker of surprise in his eyes as he found her name. Yet he recovered quickly, offering a courteous nod. "Ms. Green, we have you here, your companion. Marcus Thompson, yes. And the young gentleman, please. Go right in." Inside, the foyer soared with high ceilings decorated by ornate chandeliers. Soft, classical music drifted through the air. The hall was buzzing with conversation in hushed tones, as if every note from the quartet demanded respect. Servers glided seamlessly across polished floors, offering flutes of champagne and trays of sparkling cider. James accepted a cider with awe, sipping it like he was at a royal banquet. Hayley felt dwarfed by the display of wealth. She tried to steady her breathing, reminding herself of her purpose, to stand in the same room as Dylan, if only to ensure James was acknowledged. But she also sensed this environment was designed to protect Dylan's new life, separate from the hardships of his past. "Hayley, Marcus," a woman's voice greeted them from the left. They turned to see Charlotte Myers, the bride-to-be, stepping forward with a graceful stride. She wore a fitted beige suit, her dark hair expertly styled into a sleek chignon. Up close, Charlotte looked more poised than any magazine cover model, every hair in place, her posture exuding the confidence of someone who'd grown up with power and privilege. Hayley braced herself for hostility, but Charlotte's lips curved into a smile that verged on polite concern. "I'm so glad you could make it." She extended a perfectly manicured hand. Hayley shook it, her heart thudding, while James pressed himself closer to Hayley's side. Charlotte dropped her gaze to the boy. "And you must be... James, right?" Her tone carried the slightest trace of puzzlement, as if she'd been briefed on the presence of a child but hadn't connected the dots. "Welcome." James nodded, returning her polite greeting with a shy half-smile. Charlotte's eyes flicked back to Haley, carefully gauging the dynamic between them. "I hope the accommodations are suitable. Please let me know if there's anything you need." Haley managed a courteous response. "Thank you. Everything's fine. We appreciate it." Marcus, sensing the strain, gently steered the conversation. "How are the final wedding preparations going, Charlotte?" She exhaled in a display of feigned weariness. "My father's taking control of most details. He's rather particular. But I'm just thrilled to have everyone here." Then she glanced toward the bustling corridor. "If you'll excuse me, I have to check on the florist. Please, make yourselves comfortable." She offered them another polite smile before gliding away like a swan on a calm lake. As she disappeared, Haley breathed out. The encounter had been awkward, but not openly hostile. Marcus patted her shoulder in silent reassurance. James, still wide-eyed, gazed around the foyer. "Mom, is this where they get married?" he asked. "Somewhere close by," she replied quietly, folding a hand over his. "This is just the front entrance. We'll see the main ceremony area tomorrow." Together, they followed Marcus into an adjacent drawing room with floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked a garden. Several guests were mingling about, discussing topics from stock market trends to the current wave of tech innovations, conversations Haley recognized as Dylan's realm. She remembered how obsessed he'd once been with gaining the favor of wealthy investors. Now, he was clearly part of their inner circle. She scanned the crowd, searching for any sign of Dylan. Instead, she locked eyes with William Myers, Charlotte's father, who was positioned near a fireplace, speaking with two silver-haired men in suits. For a fleeting moment, his gaze fixed on Haley, then flicked down to James. An almost imperceptible narrowing of his eyes suggested disapproval, or at least curiosity. Haley's stomach knotted. Marcus gently touched her elbow. "Let's move to the next room." "You don't need to deal with William right now," Haley nodded, feeling her pulse in her ears. As they slipped away, she felt the protective weight of an invisible shield forming around James, around the fragile truth she carried. She had officially stepped into Dylan's world of affluence and social politicking, and she couldn't help but wonder whether her presence here was a disruption that everyone but James could sense. With each passing moment, the threshold between her old life and this new, precarious territory became more distant. The only way forward was through it, and it would likely demand more of her courage than she'd ever thought possible. Haley's breath caught the instant she spotted Dylan Stone strolling down a long corridor. He walked with a purposeful stride, greeting a few passing guests with polite nods and handshakes. Dressed in a crisp shirt and tailored slacks, he radiated the same ambitious aura she remembered, but now seemed tempered by years of high-stakes corporate battles. His jawline appeared a bit sharper, the lines near his eyes suggesting he hadn't been spared the pressures that came with success. Their eyes met, time slowed for an instant. Surprise flickered across Dylan's features. He clearly hadn't been certain she would come. Haley's chest tightened. The last time they'd seen each other, the ache of betrayal had hung between them like a bitter fog. Now, an entire lifetime seemed to stand in the space of just a few yards. Next to Haley, James sensed the tension and gripped her hand more firmly. He looked up at the tall stranger, instinctively intrigued. Haley swallowed the dryness in her mouth. Here we are, she thought, standing face to face for the first time in 7 years. Dylan stepped closer, giving a quick glance at Marcus before settling his gaze on Haley. "Haley," he said softly, a note of astonishment in his voice. You made it." She nodded, forcing composure. "I did." He tried for a polite smile, but his eyes flicked down to James. For a heartbeat, he seemed to register something familiar in the boy's features, those unmistakable eyes. Haley's heart pounded, worried that James would innocently mention a father he'd never known. Instead, James held onto Haley's hand, studying Dylan with shy curiosity. "I'm glad you could join us," Dylan continued, voice slightly strained. "Charlotte mentioned you might be coming." Marcus cleared his throat. "Dylan, it's good to see you, man. You've come a long way from the days of cheap pizza and all-night coding sessions." Dylan allowed a brief, tight laugh. "Those were simpler times," he exhaled, turning to Haley again. "Are you comfortable here? If you need anything." Haley sensed a swirl of conflicting emotions in him: regret, guilt, maybe even a flicker of happiness at seeing her again. But the presence of so many onlookers stifled any deep exchange. "We're fine," she assured him with a small nod. "Thank you." James tugged at Haley's hand. "Mom," he whispered, "can we see the flowers outside?" Haley recognized his slight distress. Too many adults, too many new faces. "Of course," she said, smiling down at him. Then she looked at Dylan, her voice catching. "We'll, catch up later." Dylan hesitated, scanning James's features once more. If he suspected something, he kept it well concealed. Yes, of course. "We can talk privately if you'd like." Haley nodded, relieved and terrified at the same time. She guided James down the corridor, away from the gatherings of wedding guests. Marcus followed, casting a meaningful glance at Dylan over his shoulder, as if to say, "There's more going on here than you realize." Stepping outside, Haley inhaled the crisp sea air. The back lawn overlooked a dramatic vista of rocky cliffs and rolling waves. Rows of white chairs were being arranged on the grass for the ceremony, while a lavish flower arch swayed gently in the breeze. It was the epitome of a high society wedding, every petal meticulously placed. James took a moment to run ahead to where an older gardener was carefully trimming roses. Haley sank onto a bench, pressing a hand to her chest. She felt winded, as though she had run a marathon. Marcus settled beside her, resting his elbows on his knees. "You okay?" he asked gently. She closed her eyes, picturing the moment Dylan had locked eyes with James. Her heart twisted. It's overwhelming, the look he gave James. "I thought maybe he suspected something, but I couldn't say anything. Not there, not in front of all those people." Marcus nodded. "Dylan's not a fool. He's bound to notice that James looks, well, a lot like him. But I suspect he's preoccupied with the wedding, the sponsors, the press. Maybe he's too distracted to connect the dots yet." Haley let out a bitter laugh. "That's Dylan for you, always juggling 100 things. I just wish I could find a moment alone with him to lay everything out. But how do I do that without sabotaging this entire event, without humiliating Charlotte or James or myself?" Marcus touched her arm. "I can try to help. Maybe tonight, at the rehearsal dinner, or even after the ceremony, we can arrange for some privacy." She gazed out at the ocean, the horizon a hazy blue line in the distance. "It just feels like everything is spinning out of my control. I mean, look at this place. This was never my world. Dylan used to talk about changing the tech landscape, but I never imagined it would lead him here, on the brink of marrying a media magnate's daughter." Marcus offered a rueful smile. "People change when power and money enter the picture. Doesn't mean the Dylan you knew is gone forever. He might just be buried under all this formality." Before Haley could respond, James sprinted back, brandishing a bright pink rose. "The nice man said I could have it," he announced proudly. "He didn't even make me pay." Haley ruffled his hair, chuckling. "Good job, buddy. That's a special flower. Hold on to it. Maybe I can give it to the bride," James chirped innocently, glancing at the grand arches. "She likes flowers, right?" Marcus and Haley exchanged a look. Haley's stomach fluttered with renewed anxiety at the thought of James presenting Charlotte with a flower. Would it melt hearts or ignite suspicions? This child, so full of innocence, was the living embodiment of a secret that could unravel Dylan's entire wedding. As the wind carried the sound of distant seagulls, Haley whispered an unspoken plea, "Let me find the courage to do what's right before it's too late." That afternoon, Haley decided to return to the Seabreeze Inn earlier than most guests. She needed a quiet place to gather her thoughts. Between James's enthusiasm and her own roaring anxieties, she felt at risk of losing her composure in the presence of so many watchful eyes. In their hotel room, James bounded onto the bed, flicking on the TV to a cartoon channel. Haley kicked off her shoes and collapsed into a chair by the window, letting out a long sigh. The tension across her shoulders felt like a vice. She reached for her phone, scrolling idly through missed messages, mostly from Ethan, checking in and reminding her he was staying in a motel off-island, ready to come if she needed him. She decided to call him. "Hey," she said when his voice crackled over the line, "just letting you know we're okay." "How was seeing him again?" Ethan asked gently. Haley closed her eyes. "Overwhelming. We barely spoke. Charlotte was there, and 100 other people. It felt like a stage, as with everyone scrutinizing us." He let out a low hum. "That's how these high society events can be. But what about James? Is he handling it all right?" She glanced over at her son, who was now giggling at some cartoon antics. "He's doing fine, for now. Everything here is like a grand adventure to him. I hate the uncertainty. I wish Dylan and I could talk privately." Ethan paused. "You know, I don't like him for what he did to you, but maybe he's changed. Maybe he'll do the right thing if he realizes James is his." "Just be careful, sis." "Thanks," she whispered, ending the call. The sense of Ethan's support buoyed her spirits, but it didn't quell the sense of inevitability looming over tomorrow's ceremony. As dusk approached, a soft knock sounded on the door. Haley opened it to find Miranda Hobbs, the event coordinator Charlotte had hired. Miranda was in her early 30s, wearing a neatly pressed suit and carrying a clipboard. She had the look of someone whose brain was constantly tallying checklists and appointments, yet her brown eyes radiated kindness. "Miss Green?" Miranda asked. "I'm so sorry to bother you. I'm just making sure everyone has the schedule for tomorrow. The ceremony begins at noon on the estate lawn, with a reception following in the banquet hall." Haley glanced behind Miranda and noticed a young assistant hovering in the hall, busily typing on a tablet. "Sure, come in," she replied, stepping back. Miranda handed her an elegant, embossed schedule. "I know it's short notice, but Charlotte wanted me to see if you'd like to attend the rehearsal dinner tonight at 8. It's at a smaller venue nearby. Usually, it's for the wedding party and close family, but she extended an invitation to selected guests." She gave Haley a measured look. "I believe Charlotte wants to ensure everyone feels included." The subtext was clear. Charlotte was performing her role as a gracious hostess, or possibly making sure Haley felt watched. Haley smiled politely, setting the schedule aside. "I appreciate the invitation. Let me think about it. I don't have a babysitter for James." Miranda nodded. "If you decide to come, bring him along if you'd like. It's not an ultra-formal dinner. More like a final get-together before the big day." Haley exhaled, relieved it wasn't strictly adults only. "Thank you. I'll let you know soon." Once Miranda left, James peered over from the bed. "Are we going to a dinner party, Mom?" She offered a tentative grin. "We might. How do you feel about it?" He wrinkled his nose thoughtfully. "Will there be dessert?" Haley laughed softly, some of her tension unraveling. "I'm sure there will be something sweet." The thought of walking into another high-pressure environment left her nervous, but she also sensed it could be her best chance for a private moment with Dylan. All day, her attempts to corner him had been thwarted by a swirl of relatives, acquaintances, and wedding staff. She stood, retrieving a dress from the closet. It was simple. a black, knee-length sheath with a modest neckline. Paired with a lightweight cardigan, it would be suitable for a casual yet classy dinner. Time slipped by. Around 7:45, Haley's phone chimed with a text from Marcus. "Hey, Haley, you coming to the rehearsal dinner? I'll be there. Let me know if you need anything." She glanced at James, who was now fixated on a puzzle book. Deciding to seize the opportunity, she texted back, "Yes, we'll go. Might be a chance to talk to Dylan." She ran a brush through her hair, checking her reflection in the mirror. Her face was pale, but she could see a spark in her eyes that hadn't been there before, a determination to break the silence that had held her captive for so long. By 8 o'clock, Haley and James headed outside, where a modest shuttle van was waiting, courtesy of the event's organizers. The sun had slipped below the horizon, the sky veined with purple and orange. James dozed off against her on the short drive, tuckered out by the day's excitement. Arriving at the rehearsal dinner venue, a historic inn with warm wooden beams and a cozy fireplace, Haley gently woke James, smoothing a hand over his hair. Inside, a cluster of elegantly dressed guests was already sipping cocktails and nibbling on appetizers. At the center, Haley noticed Charlotte, flanked by her father, William Myers, and a few other notable figures. Dylan was momentarily out of view, but the hum of small talk indicated he was somewhere in the mix. Stepping forward felt like diving into deep waters without a life jacket. She clutched James's hand, reminding herself of the invisible cameo brooch pinned at her heart, Mrs. Baker's promise that truth illuminated even the darkest paths. Now was the time to see if that light could guide her through a night that might change everything. Haley maneuvered through the softly lit inn, the smell of roasted herbs and freshly baked bread filling the air. It was a warm contrast to the intimidating grandeur of the estate. Tables with centerpieces of wildflowers were scattered around, and a gentle acoustic band strummed in the corner. James, still sleepy-eyed, clung to her hand. She scanned the room, spotting Marcus at a small table near the back. He waved them over with a subtle, welcoming grin. She approached, grateful to have a semi-private spot away from the thick of the crowd. "Thanks for saving us a seat," Haley said, lowering herself into a chair. James scrambled into the seat next to her. Marcus leaned in to speak quietly. "Any sign of Dylan yet?" She shook her head. "Not yet, but this feels more relaxed than earlier. Maybe I'll finally get a chance to talk to him without an audience." As though on cue, a new arrival entered the inn, Miranda Hobbs, the wedding coordinator. She beamed when she saw Haley, making her way over. "I'm glad you decided to come," Miranda said warmly, glancing at James. "And you brought your little gentleman." Haley smiled, noticing Miranda's genuine friendliness. "He wanted to see if there's any dessert involved tonight," she teased. Miranda grinned. "I'm fairly certain we'll have a chocolate torte. I'll make sure he gets a slice." James perked up at the word chocolate, and Haley quietly appreciated Miranda's kindness. If Charlotte was the face of polished hosting, Miranda felt more like a bridge between Haley's world and the swirling high society around them. Moments later, Dylan entered. He paused near the doorway, scanning for someone. Haley's heart pounded as his gaze fell on her table. He made a brief detour to speak with an older gentleman, perhaps a business associate, before weaving through the clusters of guests toward Haley. Marcus discreetly scooted his chair back, giving Dylan a path to Haley's side. James looked up, blinking curiously. Haley took a measured breath. Dylan cleared his throat, offering a tentative smile. "Mind if I join you?" She waved to the empty seat across from her. "Please." They locked eyes, and for a heartbeat, the rest of the room's noise faded. Haley could almost see the swirl of emotions behind his polished exterior: confusion, curiosity, maybe remorse. James toyed with the edge of his napkin, his attention ping-ponging between the grown-ups. "How have you been?" Dylan asked, his tone hushed. Haley lifted a shoulder in a small shrug. "Working." Raising James, she deliberately didn't elaborate, watching to see if Dylan would probe further. He nodded, glancing sideways at the boy. "James, right?" James nodded, polite but shy. "Hi." A flicker of something, recognition, crossed Dylan's face. "You must be around 6, he asked, recalling small talk from earlier that day. James gave a quick nod. "I turned 6 in spring." He hesitated, as if wanting to say more, but kept quiet. Dylan's jaw tightened slightly, and Haley noticed he was doing mental math. He shot her a questioning look, but neither said anything. Before the tension could heighten, Marcus intervened with a gentle cough. "Dylan, want to grab a drink from the bar? Maybe give Haley a moment to get James settled." Dylan blinked, then nodded gratefully. "Sure, Haley. Can we talk afterward?" "Yeah," she whispered, relief and dread mingling. "I'd like that." With Dylan momentarily gone, she found herself trembling. Marcus leaned in, whispering, "That went, okay, I think it's a start." James glanced at Haley, then at Marcus. "Did I say something wrong?" he asked, confusion coloring his young features. Haley stroked his hair. "No, honey, you were fine. Some grown-up things are just complicated." Not long after, a waiter approached with a tray of appetizers, miniature quiches and stuffed mushrooms. James accepted one with a polite, "Thank you." Meanwhile, Haley noticed Charlotte near the fireplace. Shooting glances their way, she wore an unreadable expression, locked in conversation with her father, William Myers. That powerful man carried an air of disapproval she could practically feel from across the room. Just then, Miranda returned with a small plate. She set a decadent slice of chocolate torte in front of James, along with a child-sized fork. He grinned, diving in. Haley mouthed a grateful thank you to Miranda, who offered a wink. "Seems like Charlotte is busier than ever," Miranda confided softly, glancing at the bride-to-be. "This dinner is supposed to ease tensions, but there's still so much stress. I've organized countless events, and honestly, this one has more undercurrents than any I've handled." Haley gave a careful nod, mindful of the many ears in the room. "I can imagine it feels intense." Miranda sighed. "Just a tip. If you need privacy, there's a small parlor down the hall. Hardly anyone goes there unless they're looking for a quiet phone call. Might come in handy." Haley flashed a thankful smile. Miranda had just handed her a lifeline. If she were to reveal the truth to Dylan, she'd need a space away from prying eyes, and the ticking clock of tomorrow's ceremony loomed over her, urging her to do it sooner rather than later. As Dylan returned with a glass of sparkling water, Haley gathered her courage. Maybe tonight was the night. Charlotte's flamboyant father might own the estate and the media channels, but this moment was hers to control. She owed it to James, to Dylan, even to herself, to speak the unspoken. All she needed was a few quiet minutes in that hidden parlor, far from the swirl of polite smiles and illusions. While James was happily distracted with dessert, Haley rose from her seat and met Dylan's gaze across the table. She worked to keep her voice steady. "Could we talk somewhere private?" Dylan glanced at the crowd of wedding guests, noticing Charlotte and William Myers engaged in conversation with a group near the fireplace. He nodded, setting his glass aside. "Yes, let's." Marcus offered a silent nod of encouragement as Haley led Dylan down a short hallway illuminated by vintage sconces. At the far end, she found the small parlor Miranda had mentioned. It was a cozy room with deep armchairs and a modest marble fireplace, currently unlit. Soft lamplight provided a warm glow, and thick drapes on the windows offered privacy from the night sky. Once inside, Dylan shut the door gently behind him. He shoved his hands into his pockets, his expression somber. Haley, I need to know. Is James... She didn't wait for him to finish. Dylan, he's your son, she stated with a trembling firmness. She could hear her own pulse in her ears. He was born about 6 months after you left. A sharp breath hissed through Dylan's teeth. He looked down, emotions battling for dominance on his face. Shock, confusion, anger at what was taken from him. Perhaps guilt. Haley, if I'd known... He trailed off, running a hand through his hair. Why didn't you tell me? All this time, tears pricked her eyes. I tried to reach you, Dylan. Calls, emails, texts, but everything bounced. I even tried contacting your associates, but they blocked me. You'd changed your number and moved on. He stared at her, realization dawning as he recalled his early business expansions, how his then manager had shielded him from distractions. He sagged into one of the armchairs. I was told, never mind, he said bitterly. So that's it, I have a son. Haley nodded, swallowing a lump of pain. He's 6 years old, his name is James. And he's smart, kind, he's everything you'd be proud of. Dylan's eyes rimmed with unshed tears. Why didn't you try again later, after I was more established? Her throat tightened. I was scared, furious, hurt. Once I realized I was being shut out, I assumed you wanted nothing to do with me or our baby. So I decided to raise James on my own. A tense silence lapsed, broken only by the hum of faint music drifting through the closed door. Dylan exhaled. I'm sorry, Haley, he murmured, voice hoarse. I should have made it easier for you to reach me. I never knew. God, I never knew. Haley's heart thudded with conflicting emotions, relief at unburdening the truth, but also the weight of what it meant for Dylan, for James, and for the wedding looming just hours away. He has a right to know you, she whispered. I couldn't keep lying or hiding. Dylan closed his eyes momentarily, as if absorbing the gravity of her words. This changes everything, he said finally. I'm about to marry Charlotte tomorrow, and now I have a son. How do I even begin to handle this? Haley braced herself. I don't have that answer, but James deserves to be acknowledged. I'm not here to wreck your wedding. I'm here because he deserves the truth. And so do you. Before Dylan could reply, the door swung open with a sudden jolt. In the threshold stood Charlotte Myers, her usually composed face now taut with shock and anger. Her gaze darted from Dylan's stricken expression to Haley's tearful one, and then back. What's going on here? Charlotte demanded, stepping into the parlor. Her voice trembled slightly, betraying her calm facade. Dylan, people have noticed you're gone. And I find you like this. Dylan stood, chest heaving with unfinished words. Haley stiffened, a knot forming in her stomach. This was not how she wanted the revelation to spread. Charlotte stared at both of them, a flicker of suspicion clouding her eyes. Haley's mind raced. She wanted to speak, but the shock of Charlotte's sudden presence held her tongue. Dylan clenched his jaw. Charlotte, we were just what? Charlotte snapped, real fear creeping into her tone. Her gaze flicked from Haley to Dylan. Is there something I should know? Haley swallowed, adrenaline surging. The moment of truth had arrived prematurely, and Charlotte's reaction would shape everything that followed. Clenching her hands at her sides, Haley realized there was no going back. The secret that had been contained for so long was about to explode into the open, and the wedding day was only hours away. Charlotte Myers stood in the parlor's doorway, her startled eyes flicking between Dylan and Haley. The tension in the dimly lit room was thick enough to swallow all sound, save for the distant hum of voices and music from the rehearsal dinner. Haley's heart pounded in her chest, and Dylan looked equally shaken, unable to form a coherent sentence. Dylan? Charlotte pressed, stepping farther into the room. What's going on? Why are you both in here looking like you've seen a ghost?" Haley felt the urge to speak, but her voice caught in her throat. She'd come here to deliver the truth privately, yet Charlotte had arrived just in time to catch them in the aftermath. Dylan inhaled sharply, turning to Charlotte with forced composure. "We just needed to talk about old times," he said haltingly. "Haley and I haven't seen each other in years." Charlotte's gaze slid toward Haley, her suspicion barely concealed. "Old times," she repeated, crossing her arms. "And why do I feel like there's more to it than that?" A charged pause followed. In that moment, Haley realized Dylan was still grappling with the enormity of learning he had a 6-year-old son. He stood there, uncertain how to respond. In a swift decision that surprised even herself, Haley stepped forward. "Charlotte, this conversation is personal," she said, choosing her words carefully. "I was hoping to speak with Dylan privately before your wedding day." Though polite, her tone conveyed that it was not a trivial matter. Charlotte's lips parted, anger and confusion warring in her expression. For an instant, Haley wondered if she would demand an immediate explanation. But before Charlotte could respond, Dylan placed a hand gently on her shoulder. "Char," he said quietly, using a soft nickname. "I promise I'll explain, but not here. Not now." Charlotte studied him, her eyes reflecting both hurt and a fierce determination to maintain control of her own event. Finally, she pressed her lips together. "Fine," she said, her voice taut, "but this isn't over, Dylan." Her sharp gaze flicked to Haley. "I'll leave you to your old times for now." With that, she pivoted on her heel and strode out, letting the door swing shut. A hush settled in the parlor again, but its quality had changed. It felt more suffocating. Dylan exhaled, raking a hand through his hair. "This is going to spiral," he muttered, a note of panic creeping into his tone. Haley sensed her own anxiety spike. "I didn't want her to find out like that," she said softly, "but she did walk in on us. Maybe it's best if you talk to her tonight. Let her know the truth." He sank back into the armchair, the weight of his new reality pulling at him. "I need time to process this first. Everything is happening so fast. The wedding is tomorrow." He looked up, meeting Haley's eyes. "I don't even know how to begin. My entire life just flipped." Haley understood that feeling. She'd lived with it for years. "I get it," she said gently. But, Dylan, we can't bury this any longer. You have a son who's out there eating chocolate cake, not knowing his father is just a few rooms away." The corners of Dylan's mouth tightened. He nodded slowly. "I want to meet him, properly. Tomorrow morning, before the ceremony, maybe I can—" He broke off, realization dawning. "But Charlotte, she's going to want answers too." Haley exhaled. "Yes, she will. And so will her father, who doesn't seem like the type to handle surprises well." At the mention of William Myers, Dylan's face clouded. "He's very protective of Charlotte, of the family's reputation, and we're already at the center of enough media attention. This wedding is his chance to showcase their brand, for lack of a better word." "You have to decide what matters more," Haley said, unable to keep the edge from her voice. "Your public image or your child?" Dylan's eyes flashed, a subtle reminder of his old spark. "My child matters more than anything. I can't fix this in one conversation." Haley felt her anger soften. If he was genuine, perhaps there was a path forward. She moved to the door, her mind racing through the tangle of emotions. "We should get back," she said quietly. "People will notice we're gone. Let's figure out a plan for tomorrow." Dylan followed, but not before lingering by the fireplace, as if weighing everything he stood to lose by telling the truth. Their footsteps echoed in the hallway leading back to the lively dining area, where the rehearsal dinner was in full swing. The contrast between the cheerful ambience outside and the storm of revelations inside that parlor could not have been starker. As they stepped into the main room, Charlotte's penetrating stare met them from across the crowd. Haley braced herself for more confrontation, but Dylan gently touched her arm in a silent signal. Not now. She nodded, returning to the table where James waited with Marcus. On the surface, the rehearsal dinner continued seamlessly, laughter, toasts, and compliments on the floral arrangements. But Haley knew the shockwaves of the truth were now set in motion. By morning, the pressure of hidden secrets and looming vows would drive them all to a reckoning, one that might shatter the carefully curated image of Dylan Stone's wedding, and possibly piece together the family James had never known. Late that night, the Sea Breeze Inn lay quiet as most wedding guests drifted off to their rooms. Haley stood by the window of her second-floor suite, gazing at the moonlit harbor. Her thoughts churned with every detail of the evening's events, from Charlotte's pointed intrusion in the parlor to Dylan's shaky promise of meeting James. Soft footsteps made her turn. James padded into the room, rubbing his eyes. "Mom, I can't sleep," he murmured. "My stomach feels funny." She knelt, placing a comforting hand on his forehead. "Are you feeling sick?" He shrugged, tears forming at the corners of his big grayish-blue eyes. "Not sick. I just feel weird. There's so many people here, and everything's so fancy. It's like we don't belong." Haley's chest tightened. She knew that feeling too well. She stroked his hair. "I understand, baby. We'll be okay. Sometimes, stepping into new places makes us nervous, but it doesn't mean we don't belong." He leaned into her shoulder, his voice muffled. "I wish I had a dad." The simple plea stabbed at Haley's heart. She sighed, pressing a tender kiss to his temple. "I know," she whispered. "And James, you do have one. You'll meet him soon, I promise." He stirred, pulling back slightly, his brows knitting in confusion. "Really? He's here?" She swallowed, recalling Dylan's solemn expression hours before. "Yes, but he's been away for a long time. He wants to talk with us tomorrow." James tried to process this, his expression shifting from confusion to a flicker of hope. "Is he nice?" he finally asked. She offered a reassuring smile. "I believe he is. You'll get to know him yourself. Now, let's get you back to bed." She tucked James into the plush hotel sheets, humming softly until his breathing grew steady. Returning to the window, she stared at the dark silhouette of the island's terrain, her mind replaying the conversation with Dylan. She recalled the young man who had once dreamed of forging a simpler life with her, before success and ambition consumed him. Would he truly be able to step up now that the truth was out, or would the gravity of tomorrow's ceremony overshadow everything? The answer wouldn't be clear until morning. Morning arrived too soon, sunlight filtering through the curtains. Haley woke to her phone buzzing, an incoming message from Marcus. "Marcus, hey, you awake? Dylan wants to meet you and James at the little cafe by the harbor, 9 a.m. He wants to talk before the ceremony stuff begins at noon." Her heart jumped. So soon. She dressed quickly, choosing a simple blouse and jeans, wanting to feel grounded rather than dressed for a socialite's wedding. James fidgeted with excitement and uncertainty as they headed out. Outside, the day was bright, the harbor alive with bobbing boats and seagulls calling overhead. They found the cafe, a quaint spot with nautical decor and a gentle breeze drifting through the open windows. Dylan was already there, seated at a small table in a corner. His expression was a mix of anticipation and nervousness. "Hey," he said, standing as Haley and James approached. She mustered a small smile, turning to James. "James, this is Dylan. James gave him a shy once-over, then slid into the seat opposite. Dylan's eyes flicked over the child's features, the same eyes, the same chin, the echo of his own face. "Hi," he offered softly. I'm really happy to meet you." James fidgeted with the menu, curiosity clear on his face. "Are you the man my mom talked about?" he asked, his voice small. Dylan inhaled, struggling to contain a whirlwind of emotion. "Yes," he said quietly, "I'm your father." A breathless moment passed. James bit his lower lip. "Really?" Haley held her own emotions in check as Dylan nodded. "I didn't know about you," he added, guilt lacing each word. "But now that I do, I'm hoping we can—" He faltered, glancing at Haley, then back at James. "We can get to know each other." James blinked. "So, do I call you Dad or Dylan?" Dylan's voice wavered. "Whatever you're comfortable with." The cafe suddenly felt like it was closing in on Haley, each table's chatter blending into distant white noise. She placed a hand on James's back, feeling the boy's slight tremor of excitement and fear. For 6 years, he had existed in a fatherless world, relying solely on Haley for guidance and love. Now he was confronted with the man who had always been just a ghost in his mother's stories. They ordered breakfast, pancakes for James, coffee for the adults, and tried to keep the conversation light. Dylan asked James about school, his favorite hobbies, and which sports he liked. At first, James was reserved, but soon he was describing his teacher and how he liked to draw dinosaurs. Haley watched Dylan's expression shift from tense to something softer. Beneath the polished veneer of a corporate magnate, there was a glimmer of fatherly pride, yet the ticking clock of the wedding loomed. At noon, Dylan was set to stand at an altar and vow his life to Charlotte, while James, his newly discovered son, looked on from the sidelines. Could Dylan reconcile these two worlds without fracturing everything? A shadow at the door made Haley look up. Miranda was standing there, scanning for them. She offered a polite wave and mouthed, "Time to go soon." Haley realized that the ceremony's preparations would begin shortly. As the check arrived, Dylan turned to James again. I have to be somewhere in a while, but can we talk more after?" James nodded, anxiety and hope mingling in his young eyes. Dylan glanced at Haley, who understood his unspoken request. "We'll be there," she assured him softly. Leaving the cafe, Haley felt the weight of the past pressing more heavily than ever. Dylan had stepped into James's life, even if just barely. But what happened next could upend the future they all knew, or lay the foundation for a new one. At exactly noon, sunlight poured through the thin clouds over the Myers estate, illuminating the rows of white chairs set up on the sprawling lawn. Guests dressed in designer ensembles settled into their seats, the gentle rustle of fabric and low murmurs blending into the faint strains of classical music from a live quartet. The air buzzed with anticipation. This was the wedding of Dylan Stone and Charlotte Myers, a grand affair guaranteed to make headlines. Haley and James arrived quietly, guided to their seats off to one side. Marcus gave Haley a reassuring smile from the row behind them. He had already whispered that Charlotte was in a separate wing of the mansion, finalizing her gown and hair, while Dylan was preparing with his groomsmen somewhere inside. James squirmed, wide-eyed at the glamorous setting. "Mom, is he getting married in that arch of flowers?" he asked, pointing toward a lavish display of white roses and greenery at the end of the aisle. Haley nodded, her stomach tense. "That's the plan," she said softly. Her mind was in turmoil. How would Dylan handle this ceremony, knowing that his newly discovered son was in the crowd, that the life he'd built with Charlotte was on the verge of being eclipsed by a secret he had never intended to keep hidden? A hush fell over the assembled guests as the wedding coordinator appeared, signaling the start. The quartet's music rose, and the wedding party began their procession down the aisle, first the bridesmaids in soft grey dresses, then the groomsmen, all impeccably suited. Haley found Dylan among them, looking handsome in his tuxedo, but undeniably distracted. His eyes flickered across the sea of guests, finally landing on James and her. She felt his stare like a lightning bolt. As the ceremony progressed, the celebrant welcomed everyone, speaking of the beauty of commitment and partnership. Haley's chest tightened. She glanced at James, who fiddled with the edge of his seat cushion. He seemed uncertain, sensing the weight of the moment without fully comprehending it. Then Charlotte appeared at the top of the aisle. She looked every bit the regal bride, an ornate lace gown flowing around her slim figure, a delicate veil framing her poised features. Gasps of admiration rippled through the crowd as she made her way forward, her father, William Myers, proudly escorting her. Yet even from a distance, Haley detected a tightness in Charlotte's smile. Dylan's jaw clenched as Charlotte drew near. Haley watched them face each other, hands joining under the arch of flowers, the celebrant's voice echoing across the lawn. Beneath the polished vows, tension crackled. What conversations had Charlotte and Dylan shared the night before? Had he divulged James's existence, or had he deferred the truth in favor of preserving this meticulously planned show? The celebrant invited them to exchange vows. Dylan drew a shaky breath. Charlotte's expression faltered for a split second when she locked eyes with him. There was a guardedness there, as though she sensed an unspoken confession lingering in the air. Haley gripped James's hand. The boy looked puzzled, searching her face for some clue as to why the atmosphere felt strained. She whispered, "It's okay," though she wasn't sure for whose benefit, his or her own. Charlotte spoke first, her voice clear and practiced, like a news anchor delivering a carefully penned address. She thanked Dylan for his ambition, his drive, his partnership in building a future that dazzled. Haley cringed inwardly. She has no idea who stands just a few yards away, she thought, glancing at James. Then it was Dylan's turn. He lifted the cue cards that had been handed to him by a groomsman, but his hand trembled. He shot another fleeting look at Haley, then at James. The hush among the guests deepened to near silence, as if everyone sensed the conflict raging in him. I promised to stand by you," Dylan began haltingly, "to honor you." He paused, lines of strain etching his forehead. Haley's pulse hammered. For a brief instant, she imagined him stepping away, calling off the wedding, acknowledging James in front of them all. The tension was thick enough to be cut by a knife. A murmur rippled through the crowd as Dylan lowered his cue cards, swallowing hard. His eyes flicked again to Haley, then settled on Charlotte. Charlotte, he tried again, forcing steadiness into his voice, "you've shown me a world of possibility, a world I never dreamed I'd be part of." His voice cracked, and Haley felt her heart twist in sympathy. Despite their painful past, she saw Dylan struggling between duty and truth, between the life he had built and the life he had only just discovered. The celebrant offered a gentle nod, encouraging him to continue. Yet at that moment, something changed. Charlotte's fingers tightened around the bouquet, her eyes narrowing just enough for Haley to notice. Had she guessed what was going on inside his mind? Tension radiated between them, so tangible that even the guests could sense something wasn't right. The hush turned into a collective holding of breath. Is he going to abandon the ceremony right here, in front of everyone? The question hammered in Haley's mind. She glanced at James, who picked up on the unease, his brow scrunching. For a split second, Haley prayed Dylan would find a way to do the right thing, whatever that was, even if it risked public humiliation. In the end, Dylan swallowed his turmoil. He pushed forward with the vows he had prepared, though his voice lacked conviction. Charlotte, with a near imperceptible exhale, looked momentarily relieved. The ceremony pressed on, the tension overshadowed by the pageantry of the final words, "I now pronounce you husband and wife." A smattering of applause broke out, hesitant at first, then growing louder. Underneath the celebratory noise, Haley could practically feel the rift opening, the truth roiling just beneath the surface, ready to break free at the slightest spark. As soon as the ceremony concluded, guests began to migrate toward the massive reception tent set up on the far side of the estate. Champagne glasses clinked under sparkling chandeliers, and a jazz quartet serenaded the crowd. The entire wedding felt orchestrated for maximum glamour, save for the undercurrent of unease swirling among the key players. Haley tried to keep James close, but the moment they entered the tent, a server offered the boy a fancy fruit drink, and he wandered a few steps to watch the musicians. Haley kept an eye on him, not wanting him to stray too far. Marcus slipped through the throng of designer suits and cocktail dresses to reach her side. "Hey," he murmured, pressing a flute of sparkling cider into her hand. "That was intense." Haley let out a short laugh. Understatement. He looked like he was going to walk away any second, and yet... She gestured toward the center of the tent, where Charlotte and Dylan stood, receiving congratulations from a line of well-wishers. Charlotte's radiant smile for the cameras did little to hide the tension in her tight posture. Marcus followed her gaze. "I bet William Myers is over the moon. The ceremony went off without a hitch. But did it really?" "Dylan's obviously torn," Haley nodded, her eyes darting to James, who was marveling at a decorative ice sculpture. "I need to speak with Dylan. We didn't finish our conversation. He's James's father. I can't just sit on this sidelines act forever." As if reading her mind, Dylan caught sight of her across the room. He appeared about to break from the receiving line, but Charlotte's hand clamped on his arm, eyes flashing with silent warning. The bride's father hovered nearby, shaking hands with important-looking individuals, occasionally throwing suspicious glances in Haley's direction. A sweaty knot of frustration coiled in Haley's stomach. She felt trapped, unsure how to proceed. Then, Miranda Hobbs, the event coordinator, appeared at her elbow. "Haley," she said softly, eyes kind. "I saw what happened during the ceremony. Are you okay?" Haley mustered a tight nod. "I'm hanging in there." "But Dylan," Miranda gestured discreetly. "There's a small corridor behind the tent that leads to the estate side garden. It's usually empty during receptions. If you want a moment with him, maybe I can help create an opportunity." Haley's shoulders sagged with relief. "Thank you," she breathed, glancing at James again. "I just don't want to upset him or cause a scene." Miranda offered a sympathetic smile. "No one deserves to carry secrets like this alone. Let me see what I can do. Keep an eye on the side exit." A surge of gratitude filled Haley. Here was an ally where she least expected it. She nodded, then subtly drifted toward James. "Hey, buddy," she said softly, noticing how he was captivated by the musicians, now transitioning into a lively jazz tune. James looked up, excitement and confusion mingling in his eyes. "Mom, can we dance?" he asked, innocent hope in his voice. Haley forced a gentle smile. "Maybe in a bit. Let's just hang tight, okay? We might need to go outside for some fresh air soon." Before he could protest, an authoritative voice rang through the tent. William Myers, toasting the newlyweds. Glasses clinked as he delivered a hearty speech about legacy, success, and family values, words that twisted Haley's stomach in knots. She saw Dylan standing beside Charlotte, face pale, lips pressed together. At the tail end of the toast, a hushed commotion near the entrance caught Haley's attention, Miranda signaling discreetly to Dylan. He cleared his throat and murmured something to Charlotte, who appeared alarmed but couldn't protest in front of so many onlookers. With an apologetic half-smile, Dylan managed to slip away. Miranda nodded once in Haley's direction, and Haley seized the moment, beckoning James to follow. They exited through a side flap in the tent, winding along a short, lantern-lit path that opened onto a secluded garden. Neatly trimmed hedges, framed stone benches, and a small fountain trickled quietly near the center. The music and chatter from the tent sounded muffled here, as though they were stepping into a completely different world. Standing near a bench, Dylan's posture sagged. He looked exhausted, the crisp lines of his tuxedo at odds with the turmoil in his eyes. When Haley and James emerged, Dylan's face softened. "Thanks for coming," he whispered, eyeing James. James gripped Haley's hand. "You're the man from breakfast," he said, his voice echoing with cautious wonder. Are you my dad now, even though you got married?" The question hung in the moonlit air. Dylan breathed out, lowering himself to one knee so he could be eye-level with James. "I am your dad," he said gently. "Getting married doesn't change that." Haley glanced over her shoulder, aware of how quickly someone might appear and blow this private moment apart. Still, the relief of seeing father and son share a quiet exchange was too strong to ignore. She let Dylan speak to James, her own emotions brimming. "I want you to know," Dylan continued, placing a tentative hand on James's shoulder. "I'm sorry I wasn't around before, and I'm sorry if things are confusing now. But I do want to be part of your life." James studied him carefully. "Okay." Then he shuffled his feet. "Mum told me you didn't know." Dylan nodded grimly. "That's right." His gaze flickered to Haley. "We have a lot to figure out." A gentle breeze stirred the garden, carrying the distant hum of celebration. Haley swallowed the lump in her throat. "We need to talk about Charlotte, too," she said softly. "And what happens next?" Dylan stood, glancing toward the tent where clinking champagne glasses and the murmur of conversation signaled the start of dinner. "Charlotte and it's complicated. We never expected this, but I can't keep it hidden." She nodded, shoulders taut. "Then we have to decide how to handle this together, or everything will blow up in the worst way." Dylan looked down at James, a tremor passing through him. "I just got married," he murmured. "And it already feels like I'm losing control." Haley's heart twisted. The path forward looked perilously narrow. James stepped closer to Dylan, placing a tiny hand on his. Haley watched them, wishing she could pause this moment and let them stay in that tender space. But reality loomed, and the knot of moral and emotional dilemmas would soon tighten further. The soft glow of lanterns illuminated the side garden as Haley, Dylan, and James huddled by the small fountain. The breeze carried traces of laughter and music from the reception, where guests were likely wondering why the groom had disappeared. Every second that passed felt like a tightening coil around Haley's heart. Dylan glanced at his watch, tension evident on his face. "I should get back," he murmured, voice laden with guilt. "Charlotte will be—" Before he could finish, the garden's iron gate squeaked open. In the faint light, Charlotte stepped through, her white gown sweeping across the stone path. Haley's pulse leapt to her throat. Had she followed them? The bride's usually poised features were etched with fear and anger, but her voice trembled with a veneer of calm. "Dylan," she said softly, "they're about to serve dinner. Everyone's waiting for the newlyweds." Her gaze shifted to Haley, then fell on James. Her expression flickered, an attempt at composure overshadowed by stark realization. "Is this him?" she asked, voice small but resonating with alarm. Dylan opened his mouth, but no words emerged. Haley felt compelled to speak, though her throat was tight. "Charlotte," she began, "I know this is—" Charlotte's raised hand stopped her. She looked at Dylan, eyes bright with tears, yet still carrying that fierce edge. "I found your phone, Dylan," she said quietly. "I saw the texts. I saw Haley's name. And I realized you've been dealing with something huge you never told me about." Her voice caught. "Is this boy your child?" The question echoed through the garden. Dylan hesitated, then nodded once, guilt and resolve blending in his gaze. "Yes, Char." "He's my son." Charlotte swallowed, tears threatening to spill. She turned away, hugging herself as if a chill had descended. "And you waited until after we said our vows to tell me?" Her words cracked with disappointment and fury. "Were you ever going to explain, or did you plan to keep it hidden forever?" Dylan stepped forward, his expression anguished. "I only found out last night." Charlotte whirled around, disbelief in her eyes. "Last night?" She shook her head, glancing at Haley. "You show up at my wedding rehearsal, drop this bombshell, and you don't think it might alter everything?" Haley's cheeks burned. She wanted to lash out, to defend herself, to clarify that she had tried to speak privately, but none of that would calm Charlotte's hurt. "I'm sorry," she managed quietly, "but Dylan deserved to know." "And so did James." Charlotte pressed a trembling hand to her forehead, tears sliding free now. "William, my father. He'll go ballistic if this gets out. The tabloids will devour us. We had this perfect image." She trailed off, voice hollow. "And now, because you withheld the truth, I'm left picking up the pieces." Dylan's jaw worked. "I never wanted to hurt you, Char. I swear. But I couldn't turn my back on my own son." Charlotte's gaze flicked to James, who stood partially behind Haley, clutching the edge of her blouse. The bride's eyes softened momentarily, empathy piercing through her anger, but she quickly reverted to her guarded posture. "What do we do now?" she whispered, more to herself than anyone else. Haley felt the tension in the air, thick as fog. She took a measured breath, summoning the quiet strength she'd discovered within herself during all those years raising James alone. "We figure this out," she said, aiming for a steady tone. "Nobody wants to destroy your marriage, but James exists, and he deserves a place in Dylan's life." Charlotte stared at the boy for a long moment, tears clinging to her eyelashes. Then she blinked, as if bracing herself. "Tonight, we go back inside and smile for the cameras. We get through the reception. No scandal, no drama. Tomorrow, when things are calmer, we talk about next steps, privately." Dylan released a breath he'd been holding. "Are you sure you can?" Charlotte snapped a swift nod. "If we let this leak now, the entire event implodes. My father will turn it into a PR nightmare. I've waited my whole life for a day like this, and I won't let it become a circus." Her voice trembled again, betraying the anguish behind the firm resolve. Haley glanced down at James, who looked bewildered by the intensity swirling around him. Her maternal instinct surged. She placed a protective arm over his shoulders. "James and I can leave if that makes it easier," she offered quietly. "We never intended to cause chaos at your reception." For a moment, Charlotte looked torn, then she shook her head, her voice softening. "That might draw even more attention. People would wonder why you vanished. Just stay. Try to be invisible if you can." Her lips twisted in bitter irony. "What a thing to ask, I know." Nodding, Haley swallowed her discomfort. Charlotte turned to Dylan, wiping her tears with the back of her hand. "We'll carry on, appear happy. Keep your distance from Haley and James in front of the guests. We'll handle the truth later." Dylan's shoulders slumped in concession. "All right," he whispered, guilt etched into every feature. Charlotte gave a hollow laugh. "Welcome to marriage, Dylan. Already a crisis on day one." She brushed past him, heading back into the estate. Left behind in the garden, Dylan looked exhausted, and Haley ached for James, who gazed up at them, confused. She bent down, pressing a light kiss to his temple. "Everything's going to be okay, sweet boy," she whispered, hoping the tremor in her voice was too soft for him to hear. As they made their way back to the brilliant lights and the swirling music of the reception, Haley sensed that the real battle was just beginning. They might have bought themselves a reprieve from public scandal, but beneath the polished veneer of the Myers estate, a storm was brewing that no facade could shelter for long. The clinking of silverware and hum of lively conversations swirled through the grand reception tent like a warm current. But beneath the show of celebration lay an undercurrent of tension. Haley could feel it in the way Charlotte would intermittently glance in her direction, then swiftly avert her eyes as if trying to maintain composure. She could sense it too in Dylan's careful detachment. He offered polite smiles and greetings to distant relatives and high society acquaintances, yet avoided any moment that might draw him too close to Haley and James in public view. Seated at a modest table near the back, Haley tried to remain inconspicuous. Marcus joined her, wearing a rueful smile and offering small talk about the quality of the food. She knew he was doing it to fill the uneasy silence. Meanwhile, James watched the party with fascination, occasionally whispering questions about who all these people were and why everyone was making toasts. She answered as best she could, hoping her own worry didn't seep into her tone. "Ladies and gentlemen," a voice boomed from the front of the tent. Heads turned, and the chatter died down. William Myers, Charlotte's father, stood near the head table with a microphone in hand. He carried the self-assuredness of a man who owned more than just businesses. He owned entire narratives. "Thank you all for joining us on this special day. My daughter and her new husband have an announcement." Haley's pulse spiked, and she cast a wide-eyed glance at Marcus. Did Dylan or Charlotte decide to reveal the truth right here? A hush fell over the guests as William extended the microphone to his newly wedded daughter. Charlotte's smile was dazzling yet strained. "I want to thank everyone for coming," she began in a light, measured voice. "This wedding wouldn't have been possible without your love and support. Over the years, I've heard so many opinions on what makes a strong marriage: partnership, trust, honesty. Dylan and I firmly believe that true commitment means embracing every facet of each other's lives." Haley's mouth went dry. Dylan stood behind Charlotte, hands clasped, his face betraying no clue as to where this was going. Charlotte drew a breath. "In that spirit, I want you all to meet someone special." She raised a hand, motioning vaguely toward the back tables where Haley and James sat. Confusion rippled through the crowd. "Dylan and I have welcomed into our hearts his 6-year-old son, James." All eyes shot toward Haley and James. A collective gasp swept the tent. Whispers cascaded from table to table, some guests half rising to get a better look. James froze, fingers gripping Haley's sleeve in alarm, Haley's chest constricted, part of her reeling at Charlotte's unplanned announcement. From the front of the tent, Charlotte's composure wavered briefly. Her lower lip trembled, but she continued, "We learned of James's existence only recently. It's an unexpected situation, but I want everyone to understand. Dylan is committed to supporting his child, and I will stand by him." The words sounded rehearsed yet raw with emotion. Dylan stepped forward, gently touching Charlotte's elbow, taking the microphone. His voice was lower, laced with apprehension. "Yes, we recently discovered that I have a son from a past relationship," he said, scanning the silent audience. "James is innocent in all of this, and he deserves to be acknowledged and cared for." Haley could practically feel every gaze piercing them from across the tent. Heat flared in her cheeks, and James's breath hitched. Marcus placed a reassuring hand on James's shoulder. The hush continued, fueled by equal parts shock and curiosity, until William Myers cleared his throat, forcing a polite, scattered applause. One or two wedding guests clapped hesitantly, unsure how to respond. William, clearly rattled, mustered a tight smile. Well, let's raise a toast to new beginnings, he said tersely, lifting a champagne glass. The subsequent wave of applause felt more like an attempt to dispel awkwardness than a genuine show of celebration. Still, it broke the frozen tension, and conversations resumed at a subdued level. Charlotte handed the microphone off to a nearby attendant and then pressed her lips together, allowing Dylan to lead her away from the spotlight. A few brave souls approached Haley's table soon after, curious acquaintances who offered polite words or guarded congratulations. Haley fielded them as best she could, though her mind was still spinning from the public bombshell Charlotte had just dropped. James, meanwhile, clung to her side, unsure why so many strangers were suddenly peering at him as if he were part of a dramatic twist in a soap opera. Marcus leaned in, voice low. "I guess that answers whether they plan to keep it under wraps." Haley nodded shakily. "Yes, but that was so public." She swallowed hard, trying to maintain calm for James's sake. "She said it herself. The truth will out. But I don't think this is the end. If anything, it might just be the beginning." She glanced across the tent, catching sight of Dylan and Charlotte stepping outside into the dusk, presumably for a moment of air or a private conversation. Whatever their plan had been, Charlotte had escalated things in front of 400 onlookers. Haley couldn't decide if she felt gratitude or dread. Perhaps, in a twisted way, it was courageous of Charlotte to speak up, or maybe it was a strategic move to control the narrative before it leaked any other way. Either way, the fragile shell around the truth had been shattered. Haley wondered if Dylan was relieved to lay his secret bare or terrified at the repercussions. Deep inside, she felt an odd mixture of sympathy for Charlotte's predicament and a fierce protectiveness for James, who was suddenly thrust into the public eye without warning. As the evening wore on, the guests tried to resume a festive mood, dancing, toasting, chatting, but the spectacle had changed. Everywhere Haley turned, she sensed veiled whispers. Did Dylan really not know? Who's that boy's mother? How will Charlotte handle this scandal? She bristled, wishing she could protect James from every sidelong glance and half-hidden murmur. James yawned, looking up at her, his eyes reflecting confusion and fatigue. "Mum, can we go back to the hotel now?" Haley kissed the top of his head. "Yes, sweetie. We'll head out soon, I promise." The great confrontation had occurred not in a quiet corner, but in a stunningly public forum, before the rich and influential. Now, the floodgates were open, and the consequences for all of them would only become clearer in the hours and days ahead. By the time Haley and James slipped out of the reception tent, the sky had darkened to a velvety navy blue, sprinkled with stars. Distant jazz music still wafted through the open flaps, underscoring the complex emotional weight that now suffused the entire estate. A row of discreetly placed lanterns guided the way back toward the parking area and the pickup zone for shuttles. Marcus offered to call them a ride back to the Seabreeze Inn. "It's probably best you get James settled," he said gently. "He looks exhausted." Haley nodded, feeling grateful for his presence. "Thank you. I'll wait for Dylan to see if he wants to talk, but if he's busy—" Her voice trailed off, a pang of sadness tugging at her heart. Dylan had pledged to be part of James's life, but tonight might already be spiraling beyond anyone's control. Marcus stepped aside to make the call. Meanwhile, Haley sat on a low stone bench with James curled up next to her, resting his head against her arm. Gentle waves of a nearby fountain provided a soothing backdrop. She stroked James's hair, whispering soft reassurances that everything would be okay. Moments later, Dylan emerged from the reception area, scanning the path until he spotted them. She beckoned him over, heart twisting at the sight of his disheveled tuxedo and troubled expression. He looked like a man who'd been slammed by a tidal wave of reality. "Haley," he said, voice raspy with fatigue. Then he looked at James, sleeping peacefully against her side. His gaze softened. I'm sorry about that announcement. For Charlotte, she decided it was better to control the story before rumors spread. Haley nodded, inhaling the cool night air. I get it. It just felt sudden. She tried to keep her tone gentle, mindful of how raw Dylan must feel. How are you holding up? He grimaced, sinking onto the bench beside them. I have to face William Myers, sponsors, the press. You name it. They've been circling around Charlotte and me since the ceremony ended. She insists we handle this properly, like a PR issue. But James is not a PR issue. He's my son. A warmth of relief spread through Haley's chest at those words. Yes, he is. And he's already confused enough. Dylan nodded, raking a hand through his hair. I need time to digest all this, to figure out how to be a father and how that fits with, well, everything else. But Charlotte's family thrives on image. They're already advising how to spin the story. It's nauseating. Haley shifted to let James rest more comfortably. I won't let them reduce him to a publicity angle. He's just a child, Dylan. A quiet sigh escaped him. I know. I promise. I won't let them exploit James. I never asked for any of this. But then again, I should have been more vigilant about my past catching up with me. She studied his exhausted eyes, recalling how each choice, his career ambitions, their breakup, his unreachability, had led to this volatile moment. Maybe it's not just about your past, she said softly. It's about your present and future. The life you're building can't exist in half-truths. He blew out a shaky breath, nodding. You're right. Then his gaze flicked to James, who stirred slightly. Maybe I can visit you two at the inn tomorrow. Spend some time, just with our son. The phrase, our son, threaded warmth through Haley's chest. Yes, I think James would love that, she replied, recalling how James had lit up during their brief breakfast meeting. But I don't want you walking into a war zone with Charlotte. Should we talk to her first? Dylan managed a grim smile. She already knows I plan to be involved in his life. She's not exactly thrilled, but she can't stop me from seeing James. Just then, Marcus returned, phone in hand. Car's on its way, he said quietly, eyeing Dylan with empathy. Do you need a ride too, man? Dylan shook his head. I have obligations to stay here tonight, deal with William Myers and the onslaught of questions, but I'll come by the Seabreeze Inn in the morning. Let's say 10 o'clock? Haley consented with a nod. Then, noticing that James was stirring, she gently roused him. Sweetheart, we're going back to the hotel, she whispered. James blinked wearily, burying his face in her shoulder. In a subdued moment of tenderness, Dylan reached out, resting his hand lightly on the boy's back. Good night, James, he said softly. I'll see you tomorrow, okay? James peeked up, confusion giving way to a sleepy half-smile. Okay, he whispered, drifting off again. Haley stood, carefully supporting James's weight. Dylan rose as well, capturing Haley's gaze. For a moment, the world seemed to hush around them, leaving only the complexities of two hearts reconnected by a child. I'll see you tomorrow, he repeated, stepping back. With a final nod, he turned toward the mansion's glowing lights, where Charlotte and her father likely awaited. Marcus cleared his throat, leading Haley and James toward the waiting car. The drive back to the Seabreeze Inn was quiet, the older man's presence a steady comfort. Haley cradled James, who slept restlessly, murmuring words she couldn't quite make out. As the car wound through the dimly lit roads of Martha's Vineyard, she watched the gentle sway of treetops and the distant outline of the ocean. Her mind drifted to the magnitude of the day, how Charlotte's public revelation had released them from secrecy, but also opened a Pandora's box of potential conflicts. Arriving at the inn, she gently carried James to their room and tucked him into bed. Then she sat on the edge, the hush of night pressing in, Despite the chaos, a small flicker of hope glowed inside her. The truth was out. Now came the grueling work of shaping a reality where James could have a father, Dylan could fulfill his responsibilities, and perhaps, just maybe, Charlotte might find a way to coexist with the child who represented Dylan's past. The next morning, Haley rose early. She had slept fitfully, her dreams fragmented by memories of the wedding tent, Charlotte's tearful announcement, and Dylan's determined face. Yet with dawn came a quiet reassurance that each new day offered a chance to patch up shattered pieces. She tiptoed around the small hotel room while James slept, flipping through her phone for any updates. A text from Marcus awaited her. "Marcus, rumor mill's already going. Some guests have been posting about the hidden child fiasco. Keep your chin up." Haley grimaced. She'd expected no less. In a crowd of 400 wealthy and influential people, secrets never stayed secret for long. She also noticed no messages from Dylan or Charlotte. Given the intensity of yesterday, maybe they needed time to regroup. At around 9, James awoke, yawning and stretching his limbs. She greeted him with a warm smile, ruffling his hair. "Morning, my sleepy head. Did you sleep okay?" He nodded, still blinking in confusion. "Mom, so is that man really my dad?" "Like what, for sure?" She crouched beside him, her heart aching at the uncertainty in his voice. "Yes, sweetie, for sure. He didn't know about you for a long time, but he does now, and he wants to see you." A spark of interest lit James's eyes. "When?" "Very soon. He said he'd come around 10. James hopped out of bed, rummaging for the clothes he wanted to wear. Haley smiled softly at his eagerness. Whatever twists and turns lay ahead, at least James would no longer bear the weight of a missing father. At 9:45, Haley guided him down to the inn's modest lobby, where warm pastries and coffee awaited guests. They settled at a small table by a window that overlooked the harbor. James picked at a muffin, fidgeting with a napkin. Every time someone entered the lobby, he perked up, only to slump again when it wasn't Dylan. Finally, the door swung open and Dylan appeared. Dressed in casual slacks and a light sweater, he looked more approachable than he had at the lavish wedding. His eyes locked on James, and a smile broke through his anxious expression. "Hey," he said softly, crossing the room. Haley gestured to an empty seat. "Good morning," she greeted him, feeling an unexpected wave of relief. "Did everything calm down after we left?" He inhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. "Somewhat." Charlotte kept up appearances. Her father's furious, but there's not much he can do now that the news is out. His gaze flicked to James, worry melting into warmth. "How are you doing, buddy?" James straightened a bit. "I'm okay," he said, eyes shimmering with curiosity. "Did you really have to wear that fancy suit all night?" A hint of laughter danced across Dylan's face. "Yes, I did. It was exhausting." Haley invited Dylan to grab a coffee, and once he settled in, he gently steered the conversation toward James, his favorite games, whether he preferred cats or dogs, and how first grade was going. James opened up more readily this time, describing his teacher Ms. Carter, his best friend at school, and how he loved drawing dinosaurs but hated practicing cursive. Dylan listened intently, occasionally asking follow-up questions. Haley observed him, a swirl of emotions coloring her thoughts. This was the Dylan she had once known, engaged, earnest, and capable of genuine kindness. At least for now, he seemed determined to be a presence in James's life. When James excused himself to the restroom, Dylan's expression shifted, shadows drifting in. "I have to talk to Charlotte soon. We're checking out of the mansion later today. The plan was for us to head to Europe for a few weeks, our honeymoon. But now, I'm not sure." Haley felt a twinge of guilt, though she reminded herself that the truth could only have been delayed, not avoided. Maybe you can postpone, or I don't know, she said quietly. But James needs stability. I don't want him yanked around. He's still confused. Dylan nodded, pressing his lips into a thin line. I understand. I'm not about to vanish on him again. We'll figure something out. Maybe I'll meet you back in Hartford once we handle the immediate fallout here. She studied him, recalling how quickly he'd vanished from her life years ago when he chose his career over their budding relationship. We'll hold you to that, she replied, voice gentle but firm. James returned, bounding up to the table. Can we go look at boats, Dad? He asked, stumbling a bit over the new word. The two adults exchanged glances. Dylan swallowed, tears hinting at the corners of his eyes as he nodded, offering a smile. Sure, kiddo, he said, standing. Let's see if there are any cool ones near the docks. Haley followed them out, stepping into the crisp morning sun. A breeze off the water ruffled James's hair as he scampered ahead, pointing to colorful boats bobbing in the harbor. Dylan lengthened his stride to keep up with the boy. Haley trailed behind, watching father and son discover each other in small, precious increments. She knew full well that these tender moments wouldn't solve everything. Charlotte, William Myers, the media, they all loomed like storm clouds ready to break. Yet the rising tide of change pressed forward, and for now, Haley allowed herself the small victory of seeing James skip happily alongside his father for the first time in 6 years. By late afternoon, Haley and James returned to the Seabreeze Inn, tired but content after hours of strolling along the harbor with Dylan. They'd even indulged in ice cream cones from a local shop, sharing laughter over James's silly attempts to guess how boats stayed afloat. Dylan had been patient, leaning down to examine every tiny seashell James plucked from the sand. For Haley, it was a glimpse into the life James had been missing, a father's caring presence. Yet despite the temporary calm, Haley sensed impending turbulence. She saw it in the tightness around Dylan's eyes whenever his phone buzzed, likely texts or calls from Charlotte, William Myers, or perhaps PR advisors scrambling to control the story. By now, word of Dylan's surprised son was surely racing through social media and tabloids. After parting ways with Dylan at the inn's entrance, he had to return to the mansion to collect his belongings. Haley took James upstairs to rest. She barely had time to settle him with a cartoon on TV before her phone rang. Charlotte. The name glowed on the screen like a warning light. With a stealing breath, Haley stepped into the hallway and accepted the call. Hello? A pause, then Charlotte's voice, guarded and tense, filtered through. Haley, I want to meet with you. Alone. Haley's stomach churned. Is Dylan aware of this? Charlotte sighed. He will be, but I need to talk to you privately, away from him, away from the noise. There's a gazebo on the western edge of the property, near the cliffs. Meet me there in an hour. The tone left little room for argument. Haley's first instinct was to refuse, but she realized any chance of forging an understanding with Charlotte might hinge on a face-to-face conversation without Dylan acting as a buffer. Fine, she agreed. An hour. She ended the call, her pulse racing. Returning to the room, she informed James she had to step out briefly. Marcus, who'd come by to check on them, offered to stay and watch the boy. You sure? He asked, worry evident in his expression. Charlotte's not exactly stable right now. Haley forced a small smile. I can handle it. I need to... One cab ride later, she arrived at the Myers estate, the scene of so much drama in the last 24 hours. The sun hung low in the sky, casting golden rays across the manicured lawns. She followed a winding path toward the cliffs, where she finally spotted the gazebo, a white, wrought-iron structure perched near a dramatic overlook of the ocean below. Charlotte was already there, leaning against a metal railing, the wind tugging at her sleek chignon. She still wore remnants of wedding day elegance, a fitted ivory dress now paired with a chic jacket, but her posture was tense, her expression grim. Haley approached slowly, heart pounding. Charlotte turned, eyes puffy from tears or lack of sleep. "Thank you for coming," she said quietly, voice tight. Then, glancing over Haley's shoulder, "You're alone." Haley nodded. "Yes." They stood in an uneasy silence. Gulls circled above the surf, their cries carried by the breeze. Finally, Charlotte spoke, her tone laced with vulnerability. "I never wanted this. I've always known Dylan had a past, of course, but I assumed I was the only one who truly mattered now." She exhaled shakily. "Learning about James it changes everything." Haley studied Charlotte's face, noticing both the steel and the heartbreak. "I understand. I never intended to blindside you. I tried talking to Dylan privately before the ceremony. None of this was how I wanted it." Charlotte's jaw tightened. "But here we are, and I'm married to a man who suddenly has a child he knew nothing about. My father's furious. He claims this fiasco could damage the Myers brand, especially if rumors about Dylan's negligence or dishonesty spread." Haley frowned. "Needing to protect a brand over a child's well-being, that's callous." Charlotte's eyes flared with defensiveness. "Believe me, I don't want James dragged into the media spotlight. This was supposed to be a partnership between Dylan and me. A solid, united front for our families. But now, half the tabloids are spinning stories about Dylan's secret love child, while the other half are speculating our marriage is doomed." Haley softened. She'd been prepared for a confrontation, but Charlotte's pain ran deep. "I'm sorry, Charlotte. This must be terrible for you. But James is not a threat. He's just a boy who deserves a father." Wrapping her arms around herself, Charlotte stared at the horizon. "I know, and I can't blame him. He's done nothing wrong. The question is, can Dylan and I build a life that includes him without tearing everything else apart?" Haley hesitated. Are you asking me to stay away?" Charlotte's gaze snapped to Haley's. "I'm not heartless, but yes, I'm worried. If you and Dylan rekindle old feelings, or if the press sees you two together too often, it'll fuel rumors. I can't handle that. Not now." The breeze rustled the gazebo's white drapes. Haley could empathize with Charlotte's predicament, even though it stung. "Dylan and I have a shared responsibility to James. There's no going back. But I'm not here to upend your marriage." Charlotte's lips thinned. "I want Dylan to be a father, but I also want him to honor our vows. That means you and I need boundaries." Haley nodded slowly. She knew establishing some framework for co-parenting was imperative. "I can agree to that. We can discuss schedules, visits, and communication that keeps James a priority but respects your marriage." A hint of relief flickered in Charlotte's eyes. She lowered her gaze. "Thank you." Then, lifting her chin, she added, "I won't pretend this is easy for me, but if we handle this carefully, maybe we can avoid a total catastrophe." Haley approached the railing, standing beside Charlotte. The ocean stretched out endlessly, waves crashing against the cliffs. In the face of such vastness, their personal drama felt both monumental and small. "Let's try for James's sake," she said softly. Charlotte nodded. Without another word, she turned and walked away, leaving Haley alone with the roar of the surf. Haley gazed at the ocean, heart pounding with the realization that this moment, fragile, tense, and oddly hopeful, might be the turning point that paved a path forward. A hush fell over the mansion's courtyard as Haley made her way out, heart still fluttering from her conversation with Charlotte. The wedding festivities had long ended, and the staff was already dismantling arches and floral arrangements. A few curious eyes followed her, but she ignored them, scanning the driveway where a line of luxury cars waited. Just as she reached the front gates, she spotted Dylan stepping out of the estate's main doors, carrying a small suitcase. He must have seen her too, because he changed course, striding toward her with hurried steps. "Haley," he called, voice echoing in the open space. She paused, stomach tightening. The events of the last day had left her exhausted, but she needed to share what had just happened with Charlotte. "We talked," she began as he approached. "She and I, out by the gazebo." His brow furrowed. "Are you okay?" Haley offered a tight nod. "Yes, actually. She wants you to be a father to James, but there are boundaries. She's worried about the media frenzy and how it might affect your marriage. I promised I wouldn't stand in your way, or hers." Relief flickered in Dylan's eyes, though a pang of guilt followed. "I'm sorry you had to navigate that. It's my responsibility." She waved it off. "It's done now, and she's right. Nobody wants James front-page news. He needs stability." Dylan shifted his suitcase to his other hand. "I'm checking into a smaller place in town. Charlotte and we need a break from all this. She wants space to figure out our next steps, and I agreed." He let out a shaky breath. "I feel like I'm caught between two worlds, trying not to fail either one." Haley understood his turmoil. She folded her arms. "James will be in Hartford, going back to school soon. If you decide to visit, we'll make it work. But I need consistency from you, Dylan." "He's had too many questions and not enough answers." Dylan nodded, gaze unwavering. "I won't disappear on him, I promise." He stepped closer, voice subdued. "I know words aren't enough, but I mean it. I want to be there for him, and I want to do right by you, too, at least to repair some of the damage I caused." Emotion shimmered in Haley's chest, but she kept her composure. "Then start by calling him regularly, seeing him on weekends if you can. Be honest. Don't let your marriage issues overshadow James's needs." He managed a small, rueful smile. "You've gotten stronger, Haley, more certain of yourself." She shrugged, her gaze drifting to the dismantled wedding arch in the distance. "I had to, raising James alone, working, surviving. It changed me." Their eyes held in a fleeting moment of understanding. Then, with a short exhale, Dylan straightened. "I better go. Charlotte's waiting inside to finalize travel arrangements. We might postpone the honeymoon. Or maybe we won't go at all. It's up in the air." Haley nodded. "Take care of yourself." He gave a final glance toward the estate, the place where he'd said vows that now felt precarious. "And you do the same," he said. "Hug James for me." With that, he turned, rolling the suitcase behind him down the driveway. Haley watched him go, feeling a quiet pang of sadness for the man who seemed pulled apart by obligations and new revelations. Part of her recalled the starry-eyed ambition that once drew them together, the hope that they could forge a life founded on mutual dreams. Now, fate had taken them on a different route entirely. Stepping through the gates, she found the taxi she'd arranged. She slid into the back seat and gazed at the mansion one last time. The driver asked if she was heading back to the Seabreeze Inn, and she confirmed softly, voice thick with emotion. As the car rumbled away from the Myers estate, the tension started to ease, replaced by a gentle, steady sense of resilience. In the grand drama of the last few days, this moment was the quiet victory. The truth had been told. James was recognized. Dylan's promise to be present gave her hope that their son would no longer carry the invisible burden of an absent father. Charlotte, despite her pain, had not banished James from Dylan's world. They were forging a path, tentative, uncertain, but a path nonetheless. Staring out at the island's picturesque roads, Haley reflected that every story of redemption carried scars, but it also carried the seed of renewal. She felt that seed glowing within her, nurtured by the knowledge that she and James could return home with dignity, carrying the courage she'd found along the way. A crisp wind brushed the windows of the Seabreeze Inn as Haley zipped up their suitcase. The ferry back to the mainland would leave in a few hours, and she wanted to be packed well before that. James was still asleep, curled up under a navy blue blanket, dreaming away the last traces of his island adventure. Despite the chaotic whirlwind of recent days, Haley felt a quiet sense of accomplishment settling over her. Dylan had promised to meet them in Hartford soon. Charlotte had tentatively opened the door to an arrangement that included James. For the first time in 7 years, Haley wasn't leaving a piece of her heart hidden away. She was leaving with the truth acknowledged. She tiptoed into the small bathroom, flipping on the light. The mirror reflected a face that looked older, wearier, but also more determined than before. The events of the wedding had forced her to confront her deepest anxieties, that Dylan might reject James, that the Myers family could wield their power to push her aside. Yet none of that had come to pass, at least not completely. They were in murky waters, but not drowning. A soft knock at the door made her turn off the light. She opened it to find Marcus standing there, holding 2 cups of steaming coffee. He gave a gentle smile. "Figured you could use a pick-me-up. How are things?" She accepted a cup, warmth filling her palms. "Thank you. We're managing. Packing up for the ferry." Marcus peeked in at James, still fast asleep, then stepped back into the corridor, lowering his voice. "I got a message from Dylan earlier this morning. He said he spent the night talking to Charlotte. Sounds like they're figuring out how to handle the media, her father, everything." Haley sipped her coffee, nodding. "Any idea which direction they're leaning? Are they still planning on traveling? Or is the honeymoon on hold?" Marcus shook his head. "He didn't say, just that he's being honest with her about wanting to visit James regularly. She's not thrilled, but she's not forbidding it. So, that's a start." Haley exhaled, relief mingling with caution. "I guess that's the best we can hope for right now. It's a complicated situation." A brief silence fell between them, filled by the distant hum of a housekeeping cart rolling down the hallway. Finally, Marcus cleared his throat. "Well, you have a place back home that's yours, a life that doesn't revolve around wedding dramas and corporate power plays. I think returning to that might do you both some good." She nodded, gazing out the window at the rising sun. "Yes, it will. James needs his familiar routines, his school, his friends, and I need to get back to work. But it doesn't feel like I'm running away this time, more like I'm moving forward." Marcus offered a lopsided grin. "I'm glad to hear it. Let me know if you need anything at all. I'll be sticking around here for another day or 2, then heading back to Boston. Ethan and I might grab a beer when we're both in town." Haley's eyes crinkled with amusement. She knew her brother's protective streak ran deep, and now that the dust had settled somewhat, he might be ready to loosen up. "That sounds great," she said softly. "Thank you, Marcus, for everything." He gave a little nod and left, letting the door shut quietly behind him. Haley closed her eyes for a moment, clutching the coffee cup as the subtle scents of roasted beans mingled with the salty island air. She felt a pang of nostalgia for how this place had briefly become a crucible, forging new bonds between father and son. A stirring noise behind her drew her attention. James yawned and rubbed his eyes, glancing at the packed suitcase. "Are we leaving now?" "Soon," Haley said, crouching beside him. "We'll catch the ferry and then drive home, back to Hartford. How do you feel about that?" He blinked sleepily. "Good, I guess. I miss my room." "But I'll miss Dad too." The word carried more confidence now, as if James had begun to absorb the idea that he finally had a father. Haley brushed a hand through his blonde hair. "I know, but remember, he promised he'd come see us. We'll talk to him on the phone too. You're not losing him again." James nodded, a small smile forming. In that one look, Haley felt the past 7 years of secrecy and worry begin to lighten. She helped him up, gave him breakfast, and soon they were riding the inn's shuttle to the ferry dock. Standing on the deck of the ferry, a brisk sea breeze whipping her hair around, Haley gazed back at Martha's vineyard. its shoreline shrinking behind them. In her arms, James marveled at the choppy waves, his eyes shining with curiosity. They were leaving the island, but not in the same way they'd arrived. The invisible barrier between their lives and Dylan's was forever changed, replaced by a fragile bridge of truth. And for Haley, that bridge, however shaky, was the beginning of a future she had once believed impossible. It was late afternoon by the time Haley turned onto the familiar residential street in Hartford. Maple trees lined the sidewalk, their leaves just beginning to fade from green to autumn gold. James craned his neck to peer out the car window, excitedly pointing to the local park down the block. "I want to play there tomorrow," he declared, as if months had passed since he'd last seen the swings and slides. Haley smiled at his enthusiasm. "Sure thing, buddy. One day back at a time." The house felt more welcoming than ever. Haley carried the suitcase inside while James darted to his room. She flicked on the lights, comforted by the sight of their modest living space, the well-worn couch, the framed photos on the mantel, the small dining table where James did homework, the subtle hum of the air conditioner and the familiar scent of their homey surroundings wrapped around her like a favorite blanket. After heaving the suitcase onto her bed, she heard a knock at the door. Her heart skipped, half hoping it might be Dylan. But upon opening it, she found Ethan standing there, looking pleasantly surprised to see her. He was dressed in casual jeans and a windbreaker, as though he'd rushed over the moment he heard she was back. "Hey, sis," he greeted, wrapping her in a warm, brotherly hug. "I saw the ferry schedule and guessed you'd be home about now. Everything okay?" She exhaled, stepping aside to let him in. "Better than I expected, honestly." "Dylan knows about James. We confronted Charlotte. Well, she basically confronted me, and the wedding is over. It was messy, but we're working on next steps." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "I'm glad it didn't end in a full-blown meltdown." He spotted James in the living room, kneeling on the rug and rummaging through his toys. "Hey, kiddo, did you have fun on that fancy island?" James lifted his head and grinned. "Yeah, I saw big boats and ate ice cream." "And I met my dad." The confident tone in James's voice took Ethan aback. He shot Haley a quick, questioning glance. She nodded, tears pricking her eyes. "He's warming up to the idea," she whispered. "Dylan was good with him." Ethan's expression softened. He crouched down beside James. "So you finally got to meet that father of yours, huh? How does it feel?" James shrugged, a shy smile dimpling his cheeks. "We ate breakfast together, and he asked about my friends. He said he'll call me soon." Ethan ruffled the boy's hair. "That's great." They let James continue playing while Ethan and Haley moved to the kitchen. She brewed a pot of coffee, though the soft light in the late afternoon made her feel like napping. Sitting at the worn wooden table, Ethan regarded her with a mix of pride and curiosity. "So, how are you?" he asked quietly, sipping the coffee. "I know you must be carrying a lot right now." Haley stared into her mug. "I'm relieved, mostly. There was a public announcement at the wedding reception. Charlotte basically told everyone about James. It was shocking, but at least I don't have to hide anything anymore." She grimaced. "Of course, the tabloids might pick this up, but I've come to realize that the truth is still better than living with a lie." Ethan nodded. "I'm proud of you, seriously. You stood up for James, faced Dylan, and dealt with Charlotte's meltdown." He paused, glancing around. "Are you worried Dylan might vanish again once the dust settles?" Haley swallowed. "A little. But I saw how he looked at James. He was genuine. Ethan, he's already talking about visits and phone calls. I think he wants to make it right." Leaning back in his chair, Ethan exhaled. "I hope so. For James's sake. And for yours too. You deserve some peace. They chatted quietly about the everyday routines of life, her work schedule at the nursing home, Ethan's job in Boston, even plans for the upcoming holidays. After so much upheaval, normal conversation felt like a balm. James eventually wandered in, hugging his stuffed dinosaur, and asked Ethan to play catch with him out in the backyard. Within minutes, Haley watched from the kitchen window as the two tossed a small rubber ball back and forth, laughter echoing. She felt tears of gratitude welling up, remembering nights of loneliness when she'd cradled an infant James, wondering if he would ever know the warmth of extended family. Now her brother was stepping into that role, and soon, she hoped, Dylan would be a steady presence, too. By dusk, Ethan left with a promise to return for dinner another night. Haley tucked James into bed after a simple meal, marveling at how quickly he slipped into a peaceful sleep in his own room. The weight of their recent island ordeal began to melt away under the soft glow of the nightlight. Curling up on the couch, Haley allowed herself a moment of reflection. They were back in the ordinary world, but she felt irrevocably changed, more hopeful, more assured. The past might have dictated that Dylan and James remained strangers. Now, the future lay wide open, waiting for them to shape it. 2 weeks passed in a gentle blur of resumed routines. Haley threw herself back into work at the New Horizons nursing home, greeting her elderly patients who welcomed her with warmth and curiosity about her vacation. She kept most details to herself, offering only that she had attended a wedding and managed to reconnect with someone important. Each day, James dashed off to school, returning in the afternoon with stories of his classmates and teachers. The difference now was the expectancy in his voice, a subtle excitement when he'd ask, "Did Dad call?" And more often than not, the answer was yes. Dylan had started phoning every couple of days, learning about James's favorite cartoon or the new song they practiced in music class. The calls were short, often interrupted by Dylan's business obligations, but each ended with a promise to talk again soon. On a crisp Saturday morning, Haley decided to take James out to a local park. Its wide green lawns and old oak trees provided the perfect setting for some one-on-one time before Dylan's scheduled weekend visit. James sprinted across the grass, brandishing a kite shaped like a dragon, squealing each time a gust of wind lifted it higher. Haley found a bench and watched him with a contented smile. As she sat there, her thoughts drifted back to the day she first held James in the hospital, pledging to protect him from the uncertainty of Dylan's absence. She could still recall the ache in her heart, the lonely nights spent pacing the floor with a crying newborn. And now, thanks to a precarious chain of events, her son could share a future that included both parents, even if the arrangement was far from conventional. A familiar voice cut through her reverie. "Well, look who's gliding that kite like a pro." Haley turned to see Mrs. Eleanor Baker, the elderly volunteer from the nursing home, hobbling toward the bench with a supportive cane. Haley's face lit up in surprise. "Mrs. Baker! What are you doing here?" she asked, quickly rising to offer a steadier place for the older woman to sit. "I don't live far," the woman said, with a mischievous twinkle in her eye. "I enjoy the fresh air on days like this. Besides, I heard you were back, and I had a feeling I might find you here." Haley chuckled, helping Mrs. Baker settle onto the bench. From across the lawn, James yelled, "Mom, watch this!" as he expertly maneuvered the kite, letting out a triumphant whoop when it soared above the tree line. Mrs. Baker smiled at the sight. "He's a lively boy. Reminds me of my grandson at that age, full of energy and curiosity." Haley nodded. "He's grown so much, and She paused, trying to form the words. "I just want him to feel whole." We came back from Martha's Vineyard with a lot of changes. Glancing at the invisible cameo brooch in her mind, Mrs. Baker nodded knowingly. "You followed the path that was set before you, dear. You confronted the past and emerged stronger." She patted Haley's hand. "I remember telling you once that facing the truth might be your only way to freedom, and it looks like you found it." Haley's eyes misted. "It's not perfect. Dylan's newly married, and James is still trying to figure out his place, but at least now he knows his father. That alone is huge." Mrs. Baker's gaze flicked to James, who was now beckoning Haley to come join him. "You can't protect your son from every bump in the road, but you've given him an anchor. The truth, that's what matters." They shared a quiet moment, the breeze ruffling their hair, the kite still dancing overhead. Haley inhaled the crisp air, recalling each conversation on the island, the public confession at the wedding reception, Charlotte's confrontation in the gazebo, Dylan's trembling voice as he first told James he was his father. It felt like a heavy novel she had finally finished writing, yet knew the sequel was just beginning. Mrs. Baker offered another piece of advice, gently pressing Haley's hand. "Whatever happens, keep that door open to compassion. Dylan might stumble on this new path, and Charlotte might resist at times, but love is a force that can mend fractures, if given the chance." Haley nodded solemnly, blinking away tears. "Thank you for believing in me." Mrs. Baker's eyes sparkled. "I'm proud of you, dear. Now go on. That little boy of yours is calling." With a quick squeeze of Mrs. Baker's arm, Haley hurried across the lawn. James bounced on his toes, thrusting the kite spool at her. "Mom, you try," he exclaimed, practically vibrating with excitement. Grinning, she took hold of the string. For a few seconds, the kite dipped, then soared again, riding the unpredictable currents of wind. As she let the spool unwind, Haley felt a surge of hope. She might not control all the gusts and twists in life, but she had found the courage to fly through them, anchored by the love she bore for her son and perhaps, in time, buoyed by a renewed faith in a future where truth and family coexisted. Late Sunday morning, the soft chirp of birds drifted through the open windows of Haley's home. She and James were in the kitchen, mixing pancake batter. Today was the day Dylan had promised to come for a full afternoon visit. James's excitement was a palpable hum in the air. He kept sneaking glances at the clock above the fridge, measuring every minute until noon. "I want to show Dad my drawings," he exclaimed, stirring the batter with extra vigor. "And maybe we can play catch in the backyard." Haley ruffled his hair, her heart swelling. "I'm sure he'll love that." "Let's finish these pancakes first." As the batter sizzled on the griddle, she glanced at her reflection in the window, calm, yet tinged with anticipation. A knock at the door sent James bounding across the living room, flinging it open before Haley could even set the spatula down. Dylan stood on the threshold, dressed in casual jeans and a navy shirt. He held a paper bag in one hand. "Hey, buddy," he said, stooping to ruffle James's hair. "How's my guy?" James beamed. Great. Mom's making pancakes. Come in." Dylan stepped inside, meeting Haley's gaze as she walked over, wiping her hands on a dish towel. For a moment, they shared a silent greeting, an understanding that despite their complicated history, they were here for James. "Smells amazing," Dylan remarked, lifting the paper bag. "I brought fresh blueberries from a local market. Thought we could add them to the pancakes or something." James tugged Dylan's arm, leading him toward the kitchen. "Yes, let's do it." The three of them bustled about in a gentle dance, Dylan rinsing berries, James chatting about the swirling patterns they made in the batter, Haley flipping pancakes until they turned golden brown. Laughter bounced off the walls, a far cry from the tense, formal world of Martha's Vineyard. This felt almost normal. They sat at the small dining table, plates piled with fluffy pancakes. Dylan reached for the syrup. "So, James, how's school? I want to hear all about your latest adventures." James launched into a lively recap of his week. New spelling words, a papier-mâché volcano project, and how he'd auditioned for the elementary choir. Dylan listened intently, occasionally glancing at Haley with a smile that echoed pride and gratitude. Once breakfast wrapped up, James dashed to his bedroom to gather his latest dinosaur drawings. Dylan and Haley lingered at the table, sipping coffee. Silence stretched a beat longer than was comfortable, prompting Haley to finally speak. "Thank you for coming," she said softly. "I know this can't be easy, juggling your new marriage and everything else." Dylan set his mug down. "It's what I want. Being here for James. As for Charlotte, we agreed that I'll spend some weekends in Hartford. We're figuring out the rest as we go." A flicker of sadness crossed his features. "She's still distant, but we're trying counseling, hoping to establish boundaries and maybe someday grew acceptance." Haley's heart clenched. She'd never intended to wreck Dylan's marriage, but it was hard to ignore the reality that James's sudden appearance had forever altered it. "I hope she finds a way to come to terms," she said quietly, "for everyone's sake." He nodded. "She wants to handle it with dignity, though it's not exactly how she pictured her life. But acknowledging James publicly at the wedding was her way of taking control of the narrative, I guess." Haley remembered that moment clearly, Charlotte's trembling voice as she announced James's existence in front of hundreds of guests. Despite the shock, it had allowed them to move forward without a cloak of secrecy. James returned, brandishing a stack of drawings, which Dylan flipped through with genuine amazement, offering hearty praise. Afterward, they ventured into the backyard, where James tossed a baseball back and forth with Dylan, while Haley looked on. She saw father and son forging a connection that had been denied them for so long. Each laugh, each proud, nice catch was a small victory against the years of absence. When James tired out, they spread a blanket on the grass, the midday sun gently warming them. James curled up next to Dylan, fiddling with the baseball glove, while Dylan told him stories about his own childhood, how he used to climb trees at his grandparents' farm, or how he tried to build a treehouse and nearly toppled off a ladder. Haley listened, an ache of nostalgia tugging at her. This was the Dylan she'd once known, adventurous, playful, and full of stories. If not for their complicated past, maybe they would have shared these moments naturally. But even so, she was grateful they had arrived here at all. By late afternoon, clouds gathered overhead, hinting at an approaching drizzle. Dylan stood, brushing off grass from his jeans. "I should head back. I promised Charlotte I'd help finalize some paperwork for a new business venture." But he turned to James. "I'll call you in a couple days, okay? And maybe come back next weekend if it works for both of you." James nodded eagerly. "Yes, we can go to the park, and I'll show you the biggest slide." Dylan crouched down, placing a gentle hand on James's shoulder. "That sounds perfect," his voice softened. "I'm proud of you, buddy." James beamed, throwing his arms around Dylan in a spontaneous hug that left Dylan momentarily stunned. Then Dylan hugged him back, eyes misting. Haley, standing a few steps away, felt her throat tighten at the heartfelt scene. As Dylan straightened, he caught Haley's eye. "Thank you," he murmured, voice rough with emotion, "for letting me in, for letting James accept me." She managed a nod, blinking back tears. "Thank you for showing up." He lingered another heartbeat, then headed inside to gather his keys. Moments later, he was gone, leaving the house eerily quiet, yet it wasn't an emptiness that weighed Haley down. It felt more like a calm after a gentle storm, one that had watered the seeds of possibility. James bounded up to her, breathless and excited. "Mom, can we call Uncle Ethan and tell him Dad played catch with me?" he asked, eyes shining. Haley laughed, scooping him into a tight hug. "Absolutely. Then maybe we'll celebrate with a pizza tonight." As they stepped inside, she felt a subtle shift, as if a new door had opened in their lives. The obstacles that once loomed, secrecy, heartbreak, fear, had not disappeared, but they no longer ruled them. In their place was the quiet promise of a family redefined, fragile, but real. And as rain began to patter softly on the roof, Haley realized her eyes were brimming with tears, not of sorrow, but of profound gratitude and release. The journey had tested her beyond measure, yet here she stood, heart full, ready to embrace whatever came next. This was the return she'd hoped for, the resurrection of a family's bond and the rebirth of hope, strong enough to guide them into the unknown future together. I hope you enjoyed today's story. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more stories like this. Leave a like and comment below what you thought of the story. See you in the next video.